All right, guys, thank you for joining us. We're just waiting for the meeting to start. Once the safety plan is one of the first things on the agenda tonight. So once hang tight when that comes in here, you will have full access to it. I'm gonna go ahead and mute my mic so you can't hear me or my dogs or my kids, and make sure that the desktop audio is on nice and loud so you can hear what they have to say. Again, you can always watch this directly by going straight to the school board website if you would like to. Ooh, not me, not what I wanted. Hi. Ooh.
You sure these guys are ready to go?
I heard that now. When you hear yourself, get ready.
Thanks for that. I call this work session to order, Ms. Superintendent.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to start with our school comprehensive education plans. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Britton.
Sir, Deputy Chief, Dr. Thomas, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir, if you don't mind. And I apologize for not getting up.
That's all right.
You're excused.
Thank you, ma'am.
Rob left you at graduation, I know.
Glad it's noted. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As Chief Britton shared, my name is Eric Thomas. I am representing Chief Britton and the teaching and learning team as we present to you the school comprehensive education plans for our CSI schools, for our ATSI schools, and our TSI schools for your review and potential consideration.
You to do with the mini roadmaps, right?
If you remember, back in the fall, someone suggested that I was the roadmap guy. So as you can see, we did not forget that. It stuck a little bit.
It's stuck.
If you think about the concept of a roadmap, a map provides an opportunity to give direction, provides an opportunity to give focus. And when we think about our school comprehensive education plans or SEPs, the ultimate goal is to give direction to the school as it attempts to improve or significantly improve student outcomes. So yes, it's a roadmap.
But there's a lot of people who have no idea what that one is up there.
Bus route.
For any of our
No paper, I mean.
seasoned individuals in the room, the image on the top right,
AAA.
Triptych.
you probably remember that concept called triptychs. That if you had a out-of-town trip, you went to the local AAA and they sort of drew you a direction and highlighted. And that was your map. For any of our less seasoned individuals, you know GPS. For any of us who know GPS, however, I don't know about you, but when it doesn't work,
It don't work.
or when there's a detour
Yes.
and the GPS don't pick up the detour,
Mhm.
it's not fun. It's not fun.
No, it isn't.
So the concept of having some direction, I think we all can appreciate the value and the importance of that. The image in the bottom right-hand corner, we will come back to that. I may end up having a new nickname by the end of the day. So we'll come back to the image of a wedding.
That's still a roadmap. What's on the buggy in the road? I mean, you ain't gonna ride in the grass.
It may be a roadmap again. As we shared, we're here simply to share with you the school improvement plans for our CSI schools, our ATSI schools, and our TSI schools. Ultimately, a SEP, School Comprehensive Education Plan, is a roadmap.
So I just need, because y'all make it sound so nice and pretty, but we actually talking about our schools in review, our schools in need of review, and our schools that are on the low performing list.
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay.
When we say CSI, CSI stands for Comprehensive Support and Improvement Schools. Those are schools that are unfortunately identified by the New York State Education Department as being in the lowest 5% of schools in the state. Our ATSI schools are schools that have been, unfortunately, for many years or for multiple years, have a subgroup that's in the lowest 5% in the state. And then our TSI schools, targeted support and improvement, those are schools who also have a subgroup that's in the lowest 5%, but they were just recently identified with that particular designation. So ATSI schools, they've had a subgroup for multiple years. TSI schools have a subgroup that's in the lowest 5%, but it's based off of 22-23 outcomes. For the district, we actually have all of our schools do a school comprehensive education plan. As far as a requirement from NYSED, it's only the CSI, ATSI, and TSI schools that are required, but we think having a roadmap for every school is really essential and really critical. So we have all of our schools have a roadmap. We started this process in April, and one of the first things that we did something called a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We had all of our principals, our administrative interns, and our vice principals, gave them an opportunity to identify, based off of previous years, the process with SEPs, what were some of the strengths that they would identify? What were some of the weaknesses that they would identify? What were opportunities, things that maybe could improve? And then what were areas that they consider to be threats? So we did this SWOT analysis. Again, you can see the various responses. What you're looking at here are themes from each of the 4 areas. And as we move forward, this really became the anchor of how we move the SEP process forward in regards to a new template, in regards to how we engage with schools. Pretty much everything that we did was generally anchored by the feedback from school leaders. Because ultimately the implementation of the SEP is really going to be anchored at the school. What we attempted to do with the strengths, we wanted to make sure that we held on to all the strengths. And you can see there's many strengths, so we wanted to make sure as we move forward that we didn't lose any of those. And then in regards to weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we wanted to make sure that we attempted to address those. So the anchor of anything that we've done really in the past 3 or 4 months around SEPs was really anchored by feedback from school leaders. In addition to the feedback from school leaders, there are some requirements by the state. So we had to make sure that any of the requirements by the state, that we also consider those. We met with assistant superintendents. We met with district leaders throughout the district to get their feedback as well, because we see this, the SEP it's the school's plan, but it's the district support to the school. So we wanted to make sure that we had just a really tremendous amount of input and feedback and voices as we move this forward. As the 3rd bullet reads, there's actually, kind of some research or best practices around school improvement planning. So we wanted to make sure that we stayed within those guidelines as well. And then we had an incredible opportunity. As you know, the district was going through its strategic planning process. So we actually were able to sort of pull pieces from the district strategic plan, even though it was still sort of in draft form. So we actually created a pretty decent amount of synergy between school plans and the district strategic plan. There's some pretty good synergy there. And as you reviewed those, hopefully you were able to sort of pull those examples out and see sort of the overlap and the alignment. And again, going back to the last bullet, constantly going back to school leaders, trying to get feedback from school leaders. Again, we talked about the SWOT activity. We also provided a survey to all the school leaders. And then we actually had 2 principal focus groups. Again, as you can see, we really tried to make sure that we had their voice and their feedback in every turn that we made. I'll simply highlight just a couple pieces from some of the survey feedback. Again, I'm not going to read all of the 5 bullets. I'll highlight the 2nd bullet because that was something that was really intentional. The 2nd bullet simply highlights that over 90% of the school leaders identified or responded that they saw their feedback in the work that we were moving forward. And we thought that was really, really critical and really, really important. You ask people for feedback, you got to actually give them some of those pieces. And then I'll identify the 5th bullet, where 85% of the school leaders suggested that they were in support of the process and in the direction that we were moving in regards to the SEP. Anytime you start talking about change, And we changed the template, we changed the process a little bit. If you can get 85% of the individuals to sort of go along with you, we think that that's really important. And we feel that they actually have some ownership for the work, which we think is really important. In regards to the sort of the two sort of most critical pieces, there are commitments and there are strategies. On the left side, I'm not sure
Are
what
you
happened
ready
there.
for my questions already?
Is anyone ever ready for your questions?
I mean, you just went there so quick.
You're good now? In regards to commitments, one of the things that we really push forward and really want to give Chief Britton, one of the areas that we really sort of tried to create some synergy and alignment between all the schools. So the 4 commitments that you see, all the schools have the exact same commitments. And we thought that was important to create some alignment, some synergy. Obviously, every school has its own context, and that's where the strategies come in. But in regards to the commitment, we thought it was really important to have some collective synergy around what are the 4 sort of overarching commitments that we would like to see happen within all of our schools. As you look at those 4 commitments, hopefully you can see the alignment with areas from the strategic plan. Because again, we were sort of doing those simultaneously. So much of the language in the 4 commitments are aligned to the 6 priorities from the strategic plan, and that was very intentional. Here's where schools can differentiate. So again, the 4 commitments, every school has the exact same 4 commitments, but how they execute those 4 commitments is largely up to the school. The 2 areas that are identified in black, accountable talk and effective PLC implementation, those are district strategies and district priorities. So we have asked all schools to incorporate accountable talk as one of their strategies, and all schools to incorporate PLC, professional learning communities, as a part of their SEP. The areas in green, these are simply examples. Every school, for the most part, of the 6 remaining strategies, they could pretty much choose whatever they wanted to choose that was aligned to their needs assessment. So it wasn't that they were just choosing anything. Based off of their needs assessment, they then had options to choose whatever strategy that was based off of their needs assessment. One of the things that we did, again, staying with commitments on the left, accountable talk and PLC implementation are sort of non-negotiables, but everything else, schools pretty much had choice. So we actually created, and you can't really tell it in hard copy or PDF version, but in a Word version, all the other strategies actually have a drop-down menu. So you can go into the drop-down menu and choose one of those menu items that we district leaders sort of pulled together and identified what were areas that likely they might choose. However, they're not required to choose any of those. If you can see at the bottom where it says school choice or school customized, if there's a situation, if you're at the Montessori school, if you're at one of the dual language schools, if you're at one of the STEAM schools, if you need to do something a little bit more specific to your school, then you don't necessarily have to stay within sort of the menu. You and your school team can identify a strategy, your choice of that strategy, and customize it for yourself. Again, anchored to your school needs assessment. So everything's anchored to what does this school need? What are the challenges at this particular school? And you identify strategies to address those particular challenges. Here's how all of this goes together. When we're talking about sort of creating alignment or creating coherence. Ultimately, again, the idea of a roadmap, where are we trying to get to? So your goals and commitments is sort of the end destination. That's where we're trying to get to. If you think about the features of a portrait of a graduate, that's where we're trying to get to. To move forward with that, you do a needs assessment. And your needs assessment really becomes the anchor of the rest of your school improvement plan. After you do your needs assessment and identify your challenges and your gaps, you identify a strategy. You identify specific actions, you create a timeline. But it all is anchored, all those pieces are anchored based off of your needs assessment. The last little piece down there, and this is an area that most schools and most districts somewhat struggle with, are progress indicators. How do we know that what we're attempting to do is actually working? You can have the greatest plan on the planet, but how do you measure progress? How do you monitor progress? How do you know that that plan is actually working? So we actually still have some work to do with progress indicators, but that's one of the most critical pieces, is being able to identify what will we use to determine that what we have decided is a concern and a strategy. How do we know that we're actually addressing it effectively? Again, we talked about how all of this starts. It starts with a needs assessment. So every school went through a process in which they interviewed students, they brought parents in, they looked at tons of data. Ultimately, they're really trying to understand what are the challenges at that school so that they can identify strategies and action items and so forth to address those. Everything is anchored by a needs assessment. After your needs assessment is done, you can see the other sort of steps to the process, identify those strategies. Again, 2 of them, were sort of non-negotiables. The other 6 customized to your school or based off of your needs assessment. We then had multiple opportunities to provide district support to schools. Schools then submitted a draft. On here, it suggests that they received feedback once. Many schools received feedback many times.
It is.
And then step 5, a final revision, and then they would submit their SEP. The calendar to the right, literally, this was the calendar that we put together to help everyone appreciate, here are due dates, here's when support is going to be provided, here's when you need to turn in a draft, all the different components of effective planning.
It's just a sample. It's
You don't want
blurry. So
everybody to
she's
see
like,
it. They know it's blurry. Everybody can see that.
Just a sample.
I mean,
Actually, it is the actual
that must
calendar.
mean it's gonna change or something. Cause I'm like, I know y'all can't see that. Y'all just sitting there.
Yes.
I brought it up on the screen. It got worse.
It looks better here than it did when I tried to pull it up, so.
Yeah, I'm just making sure it wasn't just me and my glasses. Oh Lord.
I should have went with that. It's perfectly clear.
Ultimately, this 5-step process was really the anchor to supporting the development of the plan and sort of creating a process and a timeline in which plans would actually be approved as well. And if you didn't see the first one, you really may struggle to see this one.
No, this one's much clearer than the
This is
first.
better?
The other
Awesome.
one was
yeah, this is
like y'all ain't want us to know something, so y'all blurred it up a little bit.
What you're looking at here, again, as we talked about, multiple opportunities in which district leaders supported schools. That was one of the pieces of feedback that we discovered through the SWOT analysis. Our school leaders identified they needed more guidance and they needed more support from the district. So we created multiple opportunities. In our monthly leadership academy, we provided support, we provided virtual support, we provided on-site support. And then in a particular week, and what you're literally looking at are 40 different virtual sessions that were held during the course of a 5-day period. And individual schools, whether it's principal, vice principal, social worker, whoever, could log in. And then we had district leaders facilitating a 50-minute conversation about various strategies and various aspects of the SEP. You can see in blue are all the academic strategies, yellow, the student support strategies, green, attendance strategies. As you can see, we had literally just about every department from the district participate. Again, we don't see SEPs as simply a teaching and learning component. We see SEPs really a district-wide support to schools.
What are the Eric and Dan supports? Is that just like office hours for them to get technical support?
That's exactly it. Dan Burton is sort of my right hand, and as you can see in the purple, on 4 different times on Mondays and Fridays, we provided kind of like office hours, so that anyone, if you wanted technical support on any other aspect, we would provide those.
How many people participated?
I don't know that I have a total number. What I would share is that the accountable talk on Monday and Friday was highly attended. The PLC implementation was highly attended. And I say that because those were non-negotiable strategies. Those are strategies that every school had to include in their SEP. Everything else was, again, schools could decide what their strategy was going to be. So any and everything else, you may have had 6 individuals, 10 individuals, but the ones on Mondays and Fridays, the PLC implementation and accountable talk, we probably had 10, 15, because we had every school represented in those. Every school pretty much attended one of those. Whereas the other ones, individual schools could choose which ones they wanted to attend.
I mean, it just makes, for me, I'm different. You can't say you have 40 different virtual sessions and not tell us how many people attended those 40 different sessions. So I get if it was, you have the ones that are mandatory, but I wanted to know, looking for a roundabout number of how many people voluntarily took part in it. We have to start doing some quality assurance and just because we put something out there and people attend, right? QAUR means that I'm doing a quality assessment and a utilization review. So looking at how many, because I can put it up there, but if only, it could have been 20 people each time, the same 20 signing up. That I would like to know and why others didn't.
Totally fair.
Because we spending money on this and I want to make sure that we getting the biggest.
Can get a general number, Commissioner. We'll get that and I'll put it in the Friday bulletin. These were also all led by our internal SCSD staff. There weren't any external. We ended up also recording some of the sessions so that leaders could go back if they couldn't watch the sessions and they were building a plan and they selected a strategy that was reflected here before they were building the action steps. If they couldn't get to that session, they wouldn't miss that important information. So we didn't do that initially, but that was one of the tweaks after the first session or so. We can get that from you. We can also get feedback from building leaders. Some points. Some
You
points
just gave
to
me
share.
something I had to remind the superintendent about, so thank you.
Ultimately, it turned out to be an incredible week. As Chief Britton shared, we end up videotaping some of the sessions, all of the sessions. If they had resources that was being provided, we captured those and actually created a bank of strategies so that individual schools can always go back to the materials that were provided in those particular sessions. As you can see here, this is the list of the comprehensive support and intervention and improvement schools. And then the TSI and ATSI schools at the bottom. Again, the CSI schools are the schools that unfortunately have been identified as being in the lowest 5% in the state. The ATSI schools or TSI schools, they have a subgroup that's in the lowest 5% in the state. In regards,
Sorry,
Sure.
can you, somewhere in your bulletin or something, make sure that we can have that breakdown? That 25%,
I think it's in here.
I'm looking, I was trying to figure out if it would reference some page so I could make sure. And I didn't see that, where it.
what is it?
Commissioner, do you want to know which schools fall under those?
Like, yeah, so when he's talking about this one is 25, which this one is, falls under the 25%, this one falls under the lower, can we just get the definition
Yes.
somewhere so that I can be
Yes,
able
ma'am.
to keep, because if not, I'm writing it every page to make sure I remember.
So I'll
So-
We'll get you a list of that.
and put CSI, that's what this means, the bottom
Okay.
5%, here are the schools,
Okay,
ATSI and TSI. So it'll be very similar to this, but we'll put the percentages.
thank you so
And I
much.
won't put it in a slide, so you don't have to search for it. I'll put it in the body of your bulletin.
Okay, thank you so much.
Is this looking at the bottom 5% of just other districts that are like us, or is it all schools within within New York State ed?
Great question. It's
Oh.
all of the schools, if they're rank ordered from highest performing to lowest performing, every school. Growth was not included in the past couple of years for the ranking. That's a shift
Okay.
because of COVID, the shift that the state made.
Mhm.
We're expecting that to be reintroduced
Mhm.
in the coming years, but that's been part of the challenge, that growth is usually a piece that pulls our schools up. So we get, credit for moving our kids from the lower red or red into yellow, which we know so much work is happening there with interventions. That hasn't been included, unfortunately, for the last couple of years. It will be coming back, as we expect it to. I'm not speaking for the state, but we expect for that piece to come back, but we are compared to every other school in the state of New York. Which is, you can imagine that's part of the challenge and part of the lens when we share the data, right? That's part of the data story.
Right.
And it's not just as simple as, oh, this school is ranked in this percentage. So we can clarify that as well and just put another description of.
And I have to agree
means.
with Renette because being a part of the list back in the day, that's what it was considered.
Yes.
It would be great to know how long some of these schools have been under comprehensive support and improvement. Because when I think about Fowler, I can remember when we first went on the list. And that's what we called it. I didn't know it was called comprehensive support and improvement, because that's the way it was
Yes. And that,
laid to us. So
The language.
it would
that
just be
changed.
right.
language changed as well.
Yeah,
It wasn't
okay.
always called CSI.
But it
just
doesn't
in the
matter.
Past couple of years, but it's still the percentage.
It doesn't matter if the language changed. It's a school that could possibly be in receivership and in need of receivership. That's the language that was used when you was
Right,
talking
right.
around.
Mhm.
King has been on that list since my kids were at King.
Yeah.
They work for the
Fowler,
district now.
yeah.
And we changed the name of King and started paying that STEAM money for that recognition. And I come back and I ask, because I don't see in a lot of the plans for the individual schools or anything that suggests, like on page 7, this school is committed to demonstrable improvement in student performance in, just not seeing it. Because DI is what we're looking for in these comprehensive plans that we're doing to make sure that each student has demonstrable improvement in student performance, correct? Right? Because that's where the school, that's where it is at the school. The students don't have demonstrable, right? So we're not mentioning that at all. I'm not talking about even mastery. I'm talking about, and when they move from red to yellow, right? That's demonstrable improvement.
Improvement. Mhm.
We're not talking in those terms so that people understand what that movement means.
We are though, because it's not showing in our results because they didn't count it over the last several years. When we talked, if you remember, we talked about students moving from less students being in that first category. That was growth. That's what we were talking about as a district, saying we did make movement, but it's not showing up here because they no longer are counting it. So we are speaking in those terms, but
Let me just be clear then.
okay.
STEAM at Dr. King
Yep.
was superintendent is the receiver.
Restart school. Yep.
Yes.
Superintendent is the receiver. So it could have went to someone else being the receiver, but they made the superintendent the receiver, right? It could have been another outside agency that came in or whatever she wanted to do as the receiver of that school. One of the things that came along was a name change, and some of these other things that we did. So that's how Latin Academy got its name when Hughes was so demonstrably poor in its student performance, right? After it became that swing school, when they came back up with these academies because it was about to go into receivership, really, really bad. We had like 4 or 5 schools at once, right? So when the language changed, and that's why I looked at you when you first started talking, I said, this sounds all nice, but we're still talking about these schools that are failing to perform.
Mhm.
Right?
Yep.
So again, some of these schools, as Gwen has just said, has been on the list since for a long time.
Unless they fell off and came back on. I don't know.
Like Dr. King,
Commissioner, I think what I hear you saying is right, STEAM at Dr. King was a turnaround school a few years ago. It came off the list for a year or two because it was a turnaround school, but now we're back on the list because we're not meeting those standards.
I didn't see King as a turnaround school. We can put it under that, but it was in receivership,
It
and they
was-
made Superintendent Alisea the
And they
receiver
made it
after a minute.
turnaround. They made it a turnaround. They changed the programming. They flipped the teachers.
But the demonstrable performance,
Agreed.
we never came off the list.
Agreed. For the first year that the schools were in turnaround under
They do.
receivership, they do come off the list for the first 2 or 3 years, but now we're seeing them back on. I'm agreeing with you. It's right? We have some schools that are chronically
And
appearing.
then there was
Yeah.
Brighton Academy, so I sent my granddaughter from Dr. King to Brighton Academy, both in receivership.
Mhm.
So she gets to Corcoran and then she can't do what she needs to do because she can't demonstrate that she improved on anything. So now, I mean, that's 3 schools. Thank God Corcoran ain't not there. But that's 2 schools that she went to that were in receivership, in review, and then she gets to the high school and starts having difficulty. So again, where is the demonstrable improvement for the students that came from under that? I haven't heard any, I mean, I get what you're saying. That's why we had the talk in the fall. We were asking the questions that we asked, but now it's more or less, some of these schools seem to have perpetual ability to be on this list, like a lifetime of being on this list.
So anything with state ed is a few years lag because they obviously can't keep up. How, do we know what year's data this particular, is this 22-23 data? Is it 20?
I think it's a,
The designations now are based off of 22-23 data.
Okay.
We'll have 23-24 data sometime this summer. And then there's some schools that may have a designation change based off of 23-24
Mhm.
data.
Right.
So this doesn't show anything that we've done in the past year to bring those scores up that demonstrated improvement. But hopefully we'll see some things come off next, or some schools come off or at least improve.
Again, I gotta remember, you're dealing with after the COVID years. you have to get the
Absolutely.
Baseline set.
Yep,
So you're not playing it's not apples to apples right now.
yep.
So I think the state is also working their way through those pieces as to what pieces are gonna count and when.
And the real major shift in designations happen at the end of next year based off of next year's data. Because the state's been doing an annual change and shift that's been minimal because of COVID and because they know the lag time. So really, at the end of next year is when they're gonna be making, this is your designation for X amount of time. It's also why we've been focusing on tier 1 across because of the numbers, right? What can we do? And how do we make sure that that the district is providing support to buildings on fewer things and deeper support instead of buildings, you know, identifying different things. We said, all of these are the things that will have the greatest impact in either teaching, learning, and growth or student support services. You can select from these based off of your needs, but it's not based off of 150 things. So we've narrowed what folks are focusing on so that we as a district can more deeply support understanding in those areas. And that's a major shift for this year.
But recognizing what you're saying, you're not seeing the results because the target keeps changing. And things won't be solidified again until the state says next year, you'll see exactly where you actually stand.
Interesting.
So,
When we get credit for growth.
so
26.
30.
I don't know if I'm asking this question appropriately, but so if so a principal got to choose from this list, right? And you had 2 of them that you said, okay, these are the necessary ones that there is no excuse. You have to do accountable talk and you have to do effective PLC implementation, right?
Yes.
So
Because
then,
of the impact they have on student learning proven across the board,
okay.
regardless of the.
So now what if this particular school then decided from that list to choose some other things? How are we then able to determine whether or not that was a good fit for that school? And what's the timeline that we're utilizing to assess that? And can we get it on track? You know what I mean? Can we get it on track? Are we saying, okay, if you as a school chose these ones, right? And then we find like 6 months later, like if we were to review something that, hey, these really don't match the school, they really can't, you know what I mean? Do we have measures in place to then flip?
Yes,
Just
ma'am.
trying to make sure I can
That's
put my,
Yes, ma'am.
That is an incredible question.
okay,
Incredible question. If you had a chance to review the actual SEPs, one of the things that we did this year was divided the SEP into 4 cycles.
okay,
So instead of starting the year off with whatever number of strategies and you simply keep those strategies for 9, 10 months, at the end of every cycle, so the first cycle is August through October, there will be a process in which we will look at data that we have, we'll look at any visits that's been to schools. We'll actually go through a process to examine whether what has been done the first 2.5 months is actually working or not.
Okay.
If things are not moving in the right direction, and you have to be a little conscious of how much time you give to implement something. So you got to be a little conscious of it. But the vision is that there will be multiple indicators. So it's not just one piece of data that we will look at over the course of 2 or 3 months. We'll look at 3, 4, 5 pieces of data.
Okay.
And based off of those 4 or 5 pieces of data, I think we can all appreciate it starts telling the story.
Okay.
One piece of data doesn't always tell the story. 4 or 5 pieces of data start telling the story. At the end of that first cycle, there may be adjustments. There may be additional support provided. There may be a decision based off of all the data points that, you know what, you decided, your school decided that you're going to take on this strategy. It's not having any impact. Let's start looking at something different.
Okay.
So that actually happens 4 times, actually 3 times during the year. At again, the 4 cycles, there's a August to October cycle, there's a November, December cycle, there's a January to March cycle, and then the last cycle is April to June. So 4 different times during the year, we literally will help schools assess whether the strategies that they're implementing is actually having some positive results.
Okay. You answered my other question because I was like, do we, focus on the data and what it's showing. And so that
Yeah.
answered that question. So thank you.
The only piece I would add is that the assistant superintendents, as well as other supports in the district, were part of the process. So,
Okay.
it was a dialogue, the community, school leadership team members, parents. So the decisions that leaders were making about which strategies to dig deeply into was not an isolated decision. They were having conversations, approval pieces. NICED for the first set of schools, the largest group of schools, our NICED supports are assigned to every one of those schools, and they were a part of providing feedback along the way. So it wasn't something where we said, okay, leaders, pick something. Our leaders aren't going to do that anyway. They're interested and all in with digging into data and coming up with the best plan for their students. So they had support with that along the way, as well as at Leadership Academy. There was everything was connected. There was nothing that we were talking about at Leadership Academy that wasn't from the SEPs that they worked on this year
Okay.
and or part of the SEPs for next year, instead of it feeling like the plans are a separate, isolated task for leaders to do. Let's have you plan your work and work your plan.
Okay.
So you have threats, staff adverse to change and lack of buy-in. We get that when the principal changes. So what we gonna do?
One of the biggest
What's the
pieces,
question? What was the question? It was a statement. What was the
What we
question?
gonna do?
About what?
Staff adverse to change
Mhm.
and lack of buy-in. When staff won't even receive a new principal in the building, right? How we gonna, that's a threat to the whole
It is,
process there, right?
but that's the work that we're
Yeah,
involved in right now. It's changing the culture of this entire district as to how we go about doing this work. That's the work that we're doing. Because this whole district has to change how we go about educating our kids.
And those goals will come up when? To address,
That's part of the strategic plan. That's part of our everyday interactions.
but you don't
all
need
that.
those numbers, right? You don't need those after the 23-24 data for staff, right? You don't need that. We can do that on our own, correct?
correct. I think you're making a great point in regards to staff adverse to change and lack of buy-in. One of the things that was really intentional is to have a diverse team that created the SEP. Again, this is feedback from school administrators. They acknowledge that in the past, sometimes the school improvement plan or the SEP was developed by 2 or 3 individuals.
Yeah.
If 2 or 3 individuals are developing the plan, it's their plan. No one else has any ownership for that plan. So it was very intentional to get internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, schools, parents, students, everybody be a part of the conversation so that there's a level of ownership for each and every strategy. That was very intentional.
So for my business, my SWOT tells me my strengths and my weaknesses in my business, right? So if you run this like a business plan, Tony, we can't have this down here at all. Because that means that I can't run my business if my staff is adverse to change.
And again, this is
And
feedback.
I would hope that in the future it won't be there.
Correct.
But this is our reality
This is
right
a
now.
SWOT, so I have to look at it in a different manner.
No, this
right,
is this
because-
is our reality though. Yeah.
And I think the point being is this was their feedback. We then took their feedback and created a process to attempt to address the threats and the weaknesses and the opportunities. So this was their feedback on the front end.
Right.
We took that feedback and just about everything that we did, we attempted to address all the threats, all the weaknesses, and all the opportunities.
So are you saying there were 25 threats, but out of the 25 threats, these were the themes of what?
That is
What
correct.
that's what it came out to be.
That is
Like
correct.
when you looked at it, it said, okay, these are basically what these people
Yes.
are, you know what I mean? What is being indicated and what, okay.
That is correct.
And that was collected at the beginning of the process so
Okay.
that we would know, how do we need to tweak it this year? Because we're
Okay.
getting better at the work, just like we're expecting buildings to get better at the work.
Okay.
We can't improve if we aren't real about what are you saying is your biggest challenge, leaders? And then how do we set up a process that helps to support that? And that's why we did a lot of the things, different meetings, requiring additional people to be on the teams,
Okay.
et cetera.
And based off of the feedback from the SWOT, 92% of our district leaders said that when we produced the new approach, that their feedback had been incorporated. So they
So they
acknowledge
felt like we addressed.
that's exactly
Okay,
it.
all right.
It's just
That's
principles.
exactly it. So yes, that was their original data. I mean, that's the reality.
Okay.
And we were very intentional about attempting to address what they said the challenges were. And 92% of our building leaders responded saying that we actually did that.
I'm just at a disconnect because I just hear teachers come in and say the principals don't listen, the principals don't really say much at all. And then you put that up there and it's different. I get it.
Here is
I don't-
what I think is a more than valid statement. And I think it's Superintendent Davis's point. Many of our students in the district are not progressing at the level that they need to progress. That's simply the reality. And in this process, we're hoping that this is a part of the process to help improve student outcomes by giving and supporting schools in developing a map, a strategy, a process to improve their school.
So just because I want to make sure I understand. So I see all of these schools, but I don't see any of, so I don't see any of the Montessori schools or anything of that nature. Could they fall under these?
Presently,
Or what, is there a mechanism that only says that these type of schools fall under there? I'm still trying to get okay.
totally fair.
These are the schools that fall into CSI and ATSI status. So that's tier 2 and tier 3.
Yeah.
The schools in the greatest need are tier 3. The schools in the next level are tier 2.
Mhm.
Schools in tier 1, as far as the state is concerned, they're not required to do any plan. There are no expectations.
Okay.
We as a district, though, say everybody needs to create a plan because that's best practice. So everybody had the same expectations, including, as Dr. Thomas is about to share, schools in receivership. They have to do a specific plan. So that's Cleary and Lincoln. They have to do a specific plan about demonstrable improvement indicators that's separate just for those two schools. They have to have a plan that goes to the state. We also have them create a set, and we make sure those plans are aligned.
Okay.
So the 10 schools that are missing are tier 1? All of them,
I-
correct? So
With-
all of our schools are in review
No,
Here's,
With the exception,
of ITC?
no, I'm sorry. So we do not have on here,
there's
It's
the
10
two schools in
missing.
receivership.
It's 10 schools missing, that's 20.
There- there's-
That's why I asked you how many schools there were. So
Yeah,
where does
30.
where does the rest of them fall?
the other schools, there's actually a third designation. It's called LSI. And that's local
Tier
support
1.
and improvement. So if you're not in the lowest 5%, CSI, If you don't have a subgroup in the lowest 5%, that's ATSI, that means you're in what's called LSI.
So I was going back to that group one.
That's
Yep,
good stuff.
That's LSI.
Okay.
So when we talk about the tiers, level one means that you are in a school in what used to be called good standing. So level one doesn't mean the lowest. It speaks to the amount of support. You need the least amount of support. Level three, you need the most intensive support. So the other schools, with the exception of Clary and Lincoln, because they were schools in receivership, so they're also tier three, are in LSI status.
So they're in good standing.
All right,
They
so
are
can
in
we
what
get
used to
that
be
broken
called good
down too?
standing. Absolutely.
Thank
Here's,
you.
here's another point you have to remember. As you talked about the ATSI group, usually there's a subgroup that
Right,
didn't make the standard, only a subgroup.
only a subgroup.
It's not the whole.
It's not
That
the whole
It's that that subgroup of 5%, right?
So to Dr. Thomas's point, you start to strategize specifically to deal with the
That
struggles
sub-
of that
Subgroup.
that group.
Okay,
Subgroup of
Okay.
students.
So you start to
Aren't
target
having-
those resources to
okay,
make sure that, you know, because it's not as difficult when it's not the whole school.
right, okay. Yeah, so that definition thing will help me. so I
Absolutely.
can-
And we
Absolutely.
can
We will
provide
include
a
all three.
list
Like that.
that identifies, here's the LSI schools, here's the ATSI schools,
Yes.
here's the CSI schools. We can
Okay.
provide
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
list
There will be
by
two more to the CSI,
category.
and that's because they're separate, Clary and Lincoln.
Okay,
We can do that.
okay.
Any other questions at the moment?
Thank you.
In regards to next steps, obviously, we are presenting these steps to the board for review and approval consideration. As we just talked about, all of our schools actually will complete a SEP. The 20 schools that you looked at today, they're required by the state. So those are simply the ones that we worked on first. The other 10 plus schools, they're literally finishing up their SEPs now, and we're working to support them as they complete them. But the ones that are required by the state, we prioritize those and made sure that those schools completed those first. In regards to Clary and Lincoln, both schools are in CSI status. That means they're in the lowest 5%. They're also in receivership, superintendent receivership. That means the superintendent, you know, basically has some additional flexibility in how we navigate those two schools. By state, they actually have to complete what's called a continuation plan. It's a little bit different than the SEP. We've decided that every school will complete a SEP because it's a little more targeted. It's a little bit more intentional. So ultimately, they sort of will have two plans, but we're prioritizing the SEP because it's a little bit more targeted, a little bit more intentional.
So you were saying that Clary and Lincoln, that Superintendent Davis will have the final say pretty much of what their plan will be because they're in receivership?
By state law, there's some guidance and direction that the superintendent, because they're in superintendent receivership, has a little more flexibility in what happens with those.
What's the?
It's more resource allocated, where what does that particular building need? And we can do some extra things in those buildings in particular.
Gotcha.
Again, coming on down with the next steps, the third bullet is something I am just really excited about. As we talked about the idea of, if you think about the drop-down menu and schools can identify what strategy they want, we're actually tabulating what strategies most schools chose, and we're actually creating a catalog of professional learning for those particular strategies.
Okay.
So if 8 schools or 15 schools chose this particular strategy, we're literally creating multiple professional learning opportunities within a catalog so schools can easily access that support and access those professional learning activities. I'm really excited. I mean, this is not something that you see in most school districts. I mean, this is pretty high level here, the third bullet. This is not something that you see.
It's also part of the long-term strategy and plan. Because we have a lot of growth to make. Every other district is also improving. So what's our long-term plan and strategy to improve instruction at its core? And at the same time, to address the years of gap from the COVID years and the impact that the learning loss has had on our students. So what do we need to do to improve the entire system and structure and make the foundation stronger which has been part of Superintendent Davis's long-term plan. So these are pieces that are foundational, but will be in place, create the system and structure.
I'm
Sorry,
glad you
sir.
made that point because one of the points of clarification that you just need to know is that even though the district may make growth, so may other districts,
Mhm.
which means you could still end up
In the down below.
in the bottom.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's true.
Because there's always a bottom 5%.
Yes.
So even if you improve, technically, you could still be in the bottom 5%.
That is why we are taking the time with urgency to build the foundation and make it as strong as possible. Right? Everybody's going to do these few things, right? So that we can support deeply instead of diversifying too much that then the district can't support the different strategies that that this individual schools select.
And as
Thank you,
we
Dr.
come,
Thomas, sorry.
no, let's go. The final couple next steps here, the fourth bullet, ultimately, the district is responsible for developing what's called a DCIP, the District Comprehensive Improvement Plan. That's developed by taking all the different SEPs and identifying the various strategies and challenges that individual schools have, and you create a plan, a district plan, to address the individual challenges at schools. So that ultimately is called the DCIP, and you'll hopefully see that next month. As we completed all of the SEPs, we'll take all of that data, all of those different strategies, all of the different things that are individual challenges, and turn that into a district plan to support individual schools. I think the other piece to bullet number 4 is the synergy between the SEPs, the DCIP, and the district strategic plan. Because ultimately, you should see that there should be some synergy there. There should be alignment there. When you look at a SEP, you kind of should see the district strategic plan. When you look at the DCIP, you should sort of see SEPs and the district strategic plan. So there should be some really strong alignment between those 3 components. And that's the work that's going to take place here in the next few weeks. Again, as you notice, we still have data that'll be coming in hopefully here in the next 4 to 5 weeks. Based off of that data, we'll have a process in which we'll help schools update their SEP by including actual goals. Again, we didn't have the data, so we asked them not to actually, just sort of create non-authentic goals. And then this last bullet is sort of what I shared a little bit earlier about this concept of 4 cycles. So we're not waiting 9 months to figure out whether a strategy is actually working. Literally, we've created a process that about every 2 months, we actually go through a process and have 4 or 5 data points to identify whether this strategy is working or not. If it's working, fantastic. If it's not working, let's figure out why it's not working and adjust it. If it's really not working, let's come up with a different strategy. I'm so really excited about that 6th bullet, that last bullet there. And let me close with this. And I think we've heard the phrase support. I also want to emphasize the word accountability. We have to support schools, but we also have to hold schools accountable. And when I use the phrase accountability, I'm not talking about, the big accountability as in people's jobs and all those sort of things, but having very clear expectations, reminding individuals, doing classroom visits, all of those are accountability features. So one of the things that we're working on now is creating a support structure and an accountability structure to ensure that the work that they say that they were going to do is actually taking place. Again, it's about monitoring. And with that, I will say thank you.
Did you say that you were still working on a way to assess the movement to see if the strategies are working? You don't have that in place, a benchmark type?
We actually have progress indicators at the end of every cycle. So
Mhm.
we work with schools to identify what will be the metric or the action that will be used to determine if what you've done the last 2 months is actually working. That's actually in place.
That is in place,
Mhm.
okay.
What we want to do is create a sort of a district system on how that looks on any given day. In regards, even if you just think about the strategic plan and the district comprehensive improvement plan, what's happening in schools is really an approach to monitor whether the strategic plan is actually being implemented. So that's a monitoring structure to determine if what's in the strategic plan is actually being implemented or not. So we still got some work to do. Any other questions?
No, we ain't, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So, I probably wouldn't have asked this until you showed that picture last with that caption. So how much this costing us? Cause greatness being planned in a wedding could be up to, hey, that's expensive.
Yeah.
With that picture up in relationship to this plan,
What's what costing us?
what implementation of some of the stuff that we're doing has to, if you got a picture of a wedding up there, greatness must be planned, that ain't for free. None of that. So part of what you're asking for, let's go back to the virtual opportunities in the catalog. How much is that costing us? No, you don't gotta answer now.
No, no,
But since that's there, I wanna know how much we spending to do this, because sometimes we can be cheap and just put a lot of words out and we don't get the result that we want. I wanna see the type of investment we're making into the staff along with this plan to help turn it around.
okay. And again, you're right, I can't give you a number, but at the same time, what I am going to say, what I am going to say though, is what we've done is turned, don't do that. Don't do that.
Just Nick is not here doesn't mean you can misbehave. Come on now.
I was about to count you in.
I think we've reallocated a lot of our resources to take care of a lot of this work. But I am going to point out something that I was going to say anyway, and I think you gave me a great opportunity to say it. If you listen at this table, the types of questions that we're talking about in the actual conversation we're having, it's changed over the last year and a half, 2 years. It's changed significantly.
We different.
You are, yeah, because, you definitely different.
Special.
But my point
Ask the
is,
questions that brings out the right thing.
and yes, and the expectation's different, which is part of the change that we're trying to create. The expectation's different. You're like, okay, no, show me the performance. That question wasn't being asked before. We were surviving before. We're coming out of survival mode and we're going into what are we creating and what are we producing? And how are we serving our kids and families? So I think we are making progress and we don't always notice it because we're so deep into trying to make sure it works. And I think we're getting there. It's just a little slower than we want it to be.
Now, are the SEPs for each school uploaded to OneDrive or someplace that we can go in and look at it?
They will
Yes,
be,
ma'am.
yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you did say if you go in and look, and then I was trying to figure out, well, where would I?
Yeah.
They're there.
But at the same time, remember,
Sorry.
a lot of the testing results for our elementaries won't come into like the 3rd week of August. That's when they release them. And that's when we can plug in and know where we are and where we want the goals to go to. So that piece is still in progress.
I would rather see what we have now.
Okay.
If it's something that I have to vote on and might not have the data by then, I'd rather be
Yep.
more confident than seeing the document that I'm gonna vote on, then I can wait for the data.
Sure.
Commissioner, I believe they were in the OneNote. They were in the OneNote file.
Are you sure?
I was
I
looking
was
at it
checking.
last night. They were there.
Yes.
On the financial side, because I always have to say something about financial, I actually like that we're focusing because you can get, the word synergy has been used. You can it's actually more efficient to be focusing on those fewer areas of expertise rather than trying to spread ourselves too thin and have a separate expert for each area. This way we can focus in our expertise and not necessarily need as many contractors or have one person who can be a resource to all of the folks in the district rather than needing 3, 4, 5, and 6 different experts. So I like that we're doing that.
Thank you.
And I also appreciate the fact that you're not waiting till the end of the year and it's not working because then you're wasting money. I mean, I don't want,
And time.
that's not the way to say it.
That's
It's not
probably
the
the way to say it.
That's fair.
Forgive me. The money was. They'll watch that money.
Gotta
But
watch
watch it
them, you got the
utilized
money.
efficiently. Maybe that's the word I should say, and to reevaluate and make that change.
Mhm.
And we all have to make that change. It's one of the harder things with educators, as an educator. But
Change.
I can let you, I came from the.
Say it
private
again now.
sector, But I came from the private sector also, and it was always changing. Your goals changed. Everything always changed because the bottom dollar was, do you want to get a bonus? And what we have to think about is our children's academic progress is our bonus.
Mhm, mhm.
And see, and it's so difficult, I think, for educators to think of it like that as dollars and cents. Do we pay now or do we pay down the road? And which is a lot more expensive.
Absolutely.
Well,
And
give
we have to think
educators
about
money if
that.
70% of
Truly.
these
So we
schools
want
pass
to
the
pay
test.
now and do what's, and we need to do what's best for our children so that they can have the best opportunities that should be afforded them here in our city. in our urban center. And if that means we have to make that change, we have to make that change.
I bet you if you gave them a bonus to get the kids to pass the test, all my kids would pass the test. Where's Brett? Incentivize it. I'm just saying.
But it can't be.
If 50% of your kids pass this test, here go the, boom. Jamaica, no, I'm just.
Mike, how you feel about that?
No, we don't have the money for that.
But it does.
Mike said we don't have money for stuff, we have money for it, so don't ask Mike or Mary, just look at
They
Tom.
tried that, remember? They tried that a few years back and
No,
it
not for
wasn't-
passing the test, never.
No, not for passing tests,
Right,
not the
right.
regions, right?
Any questions for Dr. Thomas?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Thomas.
Oh, I'm sorry, the side.
Still the roadmap guy, not the
Thank
wedding
you.
planner.
Not the wedding planner. That's not gonna stick.
No.
And thank you. for
I'm the
clearing
roadmap guy. Thank you,
different
guys.
tiers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Thank you, Commissioner.
I did not want them to realize that put the furniture on the
Director Ristoff, you're up next.
Thank you, sir. I promise you have no pictures of weddings anywhere in my presentation.
If you do, I get rid of them real quick.
How much is gonna cost us?
Thank you,
Delete,
Dr. Thomas,
delete,
for taking
delete,
that.
delete.
I appreciate it. So I promise to be succinct here. The Department of Public Safety are, whoa. That's not me. Don't add any wedding pictures.
I really appreciate you putting the terminology of your acronyms at the beginning. You do that a lot with your presentations. So we don't have to ask. what it's like.
And here and everybody else.
Voted.
I would love to
And
take-
everybody else.
I'm gonna have to throw out my shout out to Superintendent Davis, who taught me that earlier. So we're
Nobody
not
else listening
scratching our
up.
heads.
Comment.
So
No comment.
thank you. I'm a quick study. So just to go over, I mean, you'll hear some of this repeatedly, but some of it is very every day we're listening to. DPS is our Department of Public Safety. SPD is the Syracuse Police, the Sheriff's Office, who we've got as well. The big one you're going to hear me talk about that I have been is the SRP, Standard Response Protocol. That's a direction the state's going in. Then again, the SPO, Special Patrol Officer, SRO, School Resource Officer, and then TIP 411 is our anonymous tip safety app. And we rolled it out for workplace violence prevention reporting as well. So we actually have 2 active TIP 411 accounts right now. The LENS, the Lockdown Emergency Notification System. Then, of course, the famous NYSED, New York State Education Department. And new to us this year is the Department of Labor, DOL. With that said, there are 3 components of the district-wide safety plan, as you're aware. Dr. Williams presented the Code of Conduct, Character, and Support previously to you. The emergency response plan for the district, which we utilize the standard response protocol for K-12, and then the safety action plan that we formulate in-house through the work of our district-wide safety committee. So some interesting changes this year, pending Regents action. They have changed some of the commissioner's regulations in regard to section 155.17, which has to do with emergency management planning. The interesting part is that they're mandating that all school districts adopt a trauma-informed approach to drills. So the standard response protocol, SRP, is compliant with that regulation. I was fortunate enough to be part of a small focus group in January, February, invited down to State Ed to formulate some of these regulation changes. And they've asked us or all districts to adopt these with the intent that the Board of Regents will formally adopt them. So we are doing that. District procedures for notification of persons in a parental relation regarding drills. We need to get better as a school district, all school districts, as far as communicating with parents about drills that take place every year. We are still with the mandated number of 4 drills each year. We're working on a communications plan. I'm going to work with our communications team that's ever present to work out so that when we're actually doing drills, and this was a great suggestion that came to me from Assistant Superintendent Jennings, that we actually send out robocalls as the drill's in progress. So everybody's on the same page, parents, guardians, that we're doing a drill. There's no straight text that, hey, we're in a lockdown. I wasn't really listening, paying attention, but I know that we're in lockdown. We're huddled in a corner of the classroom. So we're going to send those robocalls out simultaneously because we want to take that off the principal's plate and be sure that we're communicating with everybody so there's no false alarms. And that's something that the state is driving. Includes policies and procedures for written consent for students to participate in full-scale exercises with emergency responders on non-school days if applicable. There's actually a permission slip. We're not going in that direction, but I just wanted you to be aware of that change. Require enhanced floor plans and labeling of doors with alphabetic or numeric door identifiers. That's something that we actually had in process. We actually have the signage in. You're going to see that starting to go up around all our buildings in a clockwise pattern. You're going to see all doors numbered 1 through how many ever successive doors there are. And the whole idea is for emergency responders and staff when we train so that they know which door is what when we refer to it for ease of operation. This is new to us. Explicitly include bus drivers and monitors and the required members of the district-wide school safety team, including within the policies and procedures. So I've reached out to Transportation Director Jeremy Smith because we're in a unique situation because when you think about it, 99.9% of our transportation is contract with Central and First Student. So I'm going to have him provide me with the appropriate contact personnel to include them with our district safety team to make sure that any information is disseminated across both organizations. So they did this in phases. So effective July 1st, 2025, pending formal adoption by the Board of Regents, there's an update to the standardized language. So they always use the SHELL acronym. We used SRP terminology with their approval. So one of the things that's been confusing forever for staff, parents, even emergency responders is the 2 words lockdown and lockout. So July 1st, 2025, you're going to see lockout be replaced with secure lockout. We petitioned for only secure. State police became involved. A lot of the downstate districts, specifically Long Island, they wanted to stay with the lockout as well. So the compromise is secure lockout. And you're going to see all of our posters be updated July of 2025. So everything that we have in place now is still applicable.
Director, can I just ask a quick question about the notification piece? So I have heard that we need to also notify parents in advance. There was some concern about the drills are supposed to sort of be a surprise and if you know they're coming, they're not going to be as responsive. But what I've heard is that you need to let parents know in advance, but it doesn't have to be specific. We need to call them and say, hey, we're doing a drill sometime this week. And then I love the piece of doing a robocall as it's happening to let them know that it's live action. But is that what you're hearing as well, that it has to be also in advance that?
You are correct, Commissioner. It's what they're looking for. They haven't gotten into the nuts and bolts of the specifics. They will, once it's adopted, they'll issue one of their guidance letters to provide the districts with the exact expectations that they have. And I know that going to those focus meetings that I was fortunate to be a part of, some districts wanted the exact, like we want it this week to go out that, elementary schools will be doing drills. They're going to settle somewhere in the middle because they don't want to announce the drills, because what they're afraid of is some parents may hold their child out of school and they don't want that to happen because that child will miss the opportunity to drill with their peers so that they don't panic when there is any situation or there is another drill. And that's part of their standardization. So we'll see where they land, but you're exactly correct.
So when you mentioned earlier about the trauma-informed part of it, is that taken into consideration that how these drills cause children trauma? And what are we trying to do to make sure that we are hitting that on the back end?
It is. And part of that is there are some districts, not us, because we transitioned to the SRP 6 years ago. We started and we did a very thorough transition. Some districts were not doing them because if you look at SRP, it's action-based. Like if I say there's a lockdown drill, it's locks, lights, out of sight. We'll never say there's a stranger, there's an intruder, there's an emergency. And the state accepts that as a trauma-informed approach because we're not looking to heighten anxiety. What we're trying to do is teach by routine the reaction that we're looking for.
Right,
So
and that's
yes,
what I thought. So when it was like, I was thinking we were already there. So I was just wanting to see if there was something additional we were taking into consideration because I thought we weren't saying those buzzwords that would heighten.
so you're correct. And
Okay.
part of that approach is that they're going to require, again, in their guidance, that a debrief is completed after the drills. And we've always allowed that. And part of our release is teachers and staff, please take a few minutes and talk with your students and their groups to see if they've got any concerns. any questions out of the drill. The whole idea is to get their feedback. If they were scared, if there was something about the drill that, you know, put them in a higher state of anxiety. So a lot of districts weren't doing that. We've already been doing that work for the last 6 years. You're absolutely correct. So NICED and the Department of Labor regulations effective 1/4/24 this past year, public school districts were mandated to introduce a workplace violence prevention program to be in place by May of 2024. This board passed a policy number 6190 on January 10th, 2024, and we followed that policy and working collaboratively with district HR and all the unions, we created a platform for a district-wide violence prevention. And we were always immune from this because our district-wide safety plan, all school districts were, really mirrors a lot of the work. But what they said was if you've got an existing district-wide safety committee, you don't need to form a whole new committee. You can use that committee to do the work, which is exactly what we did. We got a lot of input from teachers and staff from all the unions. We looked at all the sites. We created the second anonymous tips reporting line that is going to be used for only workplace violence reporting to make an anonymous platform available. And even if they want to email us directly, we would obviously address any of those concerns. So some of the other work that we did was staff training. We looked at a staff Safe Schools video platform for an employee video. There's also a supervisor video. We're going to incorporate for the 24-25 school year Department of Labor slide deck customized to our district for folks that want more information. And the whole idea is with those resources, it allows for continuous training for staff that may be onboarded at a time other than the beginning of schools. We are also looking at any additional training which may be suitable. The problem is right now there's a plethora of training out there. We don't want to jump onto a bandwagon and find out that it's really not a good fit for us as a large urban district. Some of the other things that we're doing in this area is we're going to do monthly meetings for our district-wide safety committee commencing in September, because we heard from the group as we went through this, and President Barnett sits on our committee as well, was they like the fact that we're meeting on a more regular basis. Normally we hold 3 district-wide safety committee meetings. This past year, because of the additional work, because of the Department of Labor stipulations, we actually held 5 meetings, and they like that frequency. So we're going to do it a little more informally, but we're going to offer it as a Teams option so that if folks want to participate in the monthly meetings, they can, or they can send us any of the information. And the whole idea is to look at any emerging safety issues, updates to our workplace violence prevention program, any physical site security requests, and training opportunities, and even PPE requests that we're seeing that those are still coming in for certain buildings. Our safety plan's in place. We've been SRP district for a while, and the state is, as I said, contracting with the I Love You Guys Foundation, which they're actually the parent group for Standard Response Protocol. SRP will amend all their training materials and anything that they provide to us in compliance with NICED regulations. So we're really positioned well to move this forward, where some districts are really scrambling to adopt SRP. So I talked about collaboration, and to me, that's the key to do things efficiently and with partners so everybody's on the same page. Some of the things that we collaborate on a daily basis that you may see or may not, threat assessment with law enforcement agencies and communication. We provide updated floor plans to all police agencies as we're required to by state ed, from the Syracuse Police to the Sheriff's Office of the New York State Police. We do our all hazards planning, NICED regulations, they're updated annually. Our building level plans are in the process of being updated this week with all the principals with our emergency management coordinator. We provide SRP training to the Syracuse Police Department so they're familiar with what they'll see when they come into our buildings when we're in lockdown. We participate in the 911 digital communications radio network, which is really a great piece for us. We're doing the lockdown drills. Our partnership with SUNY Research Foundation cycled. Last year we completed that partnership. So we've taken over that as an internal function. We recently licensed their communication lockdown drill evaluation form so we can still collect the data efficiently and share that data with the building leaders after we perform the drill. The nice part is they see where they need to work on, whether it's communication with staff, whether it's communication on locking doors, clearing hallways of students. So that instant piece, they really like that reporting piece. So we're continuing with that. Threats. We hear a lot about threats, and we're very fortunate that we're able to respond to threats. Every threat that we receive, obviously, we take seriously until we vet that threat with help from local law enforcement and even national law enforcement. When you see a lot of the robo threats that are going out to other districts that are impacting their operations and they may close for the day, we don't, because we've already vetted that threat. We have the communications network with the FBI, with the state police, with the Syracuse police, where we know those calls are going to be coming. We know the manner it's going to be received by an email. We kind of know the IP address that it's coming from. So that allows us to communicate with the superintendent and continue continuity of operations where we're not closing down school for the day. We're not responding to those low credibility false threats that the only reason they're still sending them out is to elicit a response. And there are other districts that aren't positioned as we are for safety, and they respond to those threats.
Tom, can you, excuse me, could you
Yes, sir.
speak to a little bit? I know procedures changed over the last year or so, where if it's mental health related, we're not necessarily calling police department, we're calling like a mobile unit.
That's a great point, Superintendent. So what the district has adopted with the lead of Onondaga County and with the Syracuse Police Department is the Salem Kaiser model. That's a West Coast model. So we have a crisis prevention team or crisis response team, excuse me, where we partnered with Liberty Resources along with Onondaga County. So if we've got a student in crisis or any person in crisis in the district, the police response is no longer the standard anymore because they may not be the best ones equipped to handle the person in crisis. And we don't ever want to turn a student in crisis situation into a law enforcement intervention if there's other steps. So we reach out to Liberty Resources. There's a hotline that the schools call. They notify us as well. They notify student support services. They send out a team to actually look at the situation, intervene, and make the proper assessment as to where that student needs to go, whether it's upstate peds or whether it's CPEP. That's one that's not on there. The psychiatric evaluation program at St. Joe's for further help. And the whole idea is not to stigmatize that student, but to get them the help that they need to continue forward and to get them that long-term help. And Liberty Resources is great about following up with families after the event. So we
And
Are-
we have, sorry, since you
Go ahead.
mentioned that, so we
Yep.
have heard from our families that when in this type of crisis response situation, that Liberty Resources has then followed up with them thereafter to assess and make sure that, okay.
We are hearing that, and we're hearing it from Liberty Resources. So Student Support Services has regular meetings with them because obviously if a student's in crisis and part of the reentry plan is to come back to the school, we want them to be successful. So that follow-up is critical to their reentry. So just a quick bit on threats a little further. So we're going to tailor our response to the level of threat. And the whole idea is continuity of operations while maintaining safety. And the whole idea is we're going to put more information out there. We're launching posters this school year, basically see something, say something. If somebody's aware of something, and to our success, we'll get a threat that may be an old thread. We'll see it a day later when somebody reposts on Facebook, comes to us again, and we already have the backstory of it, which really cuts down on a lot of that he said, she said, where threats continue to spiral. So we're working on that. We're working on more positive communications, communicating with families as well, so they know we're already aware of a threat, but we don't ever want to discourage anybody from sharing something with us.
So what I'm gonna reemphasize though, if a threat comes in like late at night or early in the morning, by the time school open, many things have happened that people don't really know. So it's like, we'll get a number of people reporting the same incident, even though we've already been involved in it for the last several hours.
I'm sorry to say I've made far more phone calls than I'd like to the superintendent after hours, and he's made some to me as well, just to make sure that we're in front of things. And it's worked, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, just because we see more and more threats.
I have a quick question because I wasn't aware that the state police and also Onondaga County Sheriff's Office comes to the school. I'm not sure if, I mean, I just wanted to kind of know what type of scenario would that be? I'm not sure if that's something that you want to share with me later. but just to know, because I think that that's a great area for me and understanding when that might be. I could assume what it is, but that might not be appropriate.
So your assumption is more than likely correct. It would be in a true critical incident
Okay.
where Syracuse police needed additional resources, whether it's a crisis response team, hostage negotiators, additional law enforcement personnel, because what would happen is if it exceeds the staffing of the Syracuse Police Department during the day, they do what's called mutual aid to the sheriff and to the state police. And basically it's an all call, everybody comes.
Okay.
There's an all hands on deck. And that's the situation. So we try to get in front of that as well. We share everything with them. We're only mandated to really share it with the state police and the Syracuse police. We have a great working relationship with the sheriff's office as well. And any other, there's actually a district attorney's advisory, Safe Schools Information Council, that we participate in. So we talk to all law enforcement in the area as a preventative note.
Okay.
Director Ristoff, there's also occasions when state police and the sheriff's department cover for SPD, correct? And so that could be if SPD is not available at all for, say, they're all going to a particular event. You'll have an instance where state police will cover and so they may be the one showing up at the school, right?
Correct, because they have overlapping jurisdiction as well. So they can
They
operate
also
within the
have
city.
these programs that target certain neighborhoods, so they come together and do these things called impact, as you know. And they're already in our neighborhood, so they get attached to the schools and we sign agreements to do it. It's not that, it's these things that they do,
Mhm.
like Project Exile and others that come into neighborhoods that bring all 3 units together and they stay within the unit in the neighborhood and they share information back and forth as we do with them to the things that are happening in the community as well as the things that are happening in the school day, so it doesn't seep in to the community.
Exactly. So administrative entry searches, we've really honed in on this. We do our daily searches at the high schools. All students and visitors are searched, and we're only looking for weapons. If we find something incidental to the search that may be considered contraband in a school, that's when that would come into play for a code of conduct violation. We're not looking for anything other than weapons entering our schools. Illegal substances often come up, and that's usually a cursory part of that search. We use the baggage scanners as the least intrusive and most effective, where we really get students through the process quickly and comprehensively.
So wait,
Yes.
so,
I'm told to put my hand down. On it.
so you're saying that we are so there would have to be another reason to
Something appears suspicious and you would go in the bag and perhaps find something else that could be considered contraband.
right, but other than that, there is no protocol that we are utilizing.
So part of this is that we're looking for weapons, any illegal substances. The struggle with that is that we never want to violate anybody's rights
Right.
to unreasonable search and seizure.
Mhm.
So we use the least intrusive and highly effective method. We do find a lot of items that would be considered contraband, and their weapon is defined by school district policy.
Okay.
However, they would not be a chargeable offense under penal law in New York State. So the idea is that, people ask us all the time, are you looking for this? Are you looking for that? No, really, our search is focused on weapons. Are there a lot of things discovered through that process? Yes.
So you're hoping that a weapon would be somehow in there along with the other contraband or illegal substance in order, not hoping, but I'm trying to,
Oh, yeah.
not hoping, but you get what I'm just trying to say, like, okay, if the search is only that we're focused on has to do with a weapon. And and I respect the fact that we're not trying to have people under illegal searches and seizures, but at the same time, I guess I'm just a little bit I'm concerned about how we're going to catch those other things if a weapon is not involved in what protocols we're using to make sure that it's not some other method that we're using
So.
to make that determination.
I'm gonna keep this general.
Yes.
There's certain things I'm not going to say in this environment.
Yes.
right? We're trying to balance, making sure illegal things don't come into the building,
Yes.
right? With respecting the time and the privacy of folks,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Very difficult balance.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of reasons we can look in everybody's bag.
Yep.
But it's not practical.
Right.
Because then you'll get a whole different set of complaints,
Yes.
right? And the majority of folks aren't bringing stuff in they shouldn't. But you're also not catching the ones who might.
Okay.
So we got to figure out that balance, and
And that's
and
what
we
I
talked
was
to everyone.
basically asking, and I was trying to figure out the best way. Nobody's hoping anybody brings anything in, you know what I mean? That is contraband, illegal substance, or weapons, but just trying to figure out how we're targeting that balance because we have real concerns. You know what I mean?
There are manufacturers out there that's making the job even more difficult by the things that they create.
Agreed.
So because we have all these partnerships with all these law enforcement agencies, what professional development are we getting from them on looking at some of these things that become trend worthy? SPD put on trend worthy weapons a few weeks ago, if you all know what I'm talking about, with a printer
Mhm.
that can't be detected.
Mhm.
So are we taking courses to make sure that we're up to date on these new trends to produce weapons? Because they're not going through these same manufacturers anymore. And that's what we can't keep focusing on is the manufacturer. Because I don't need a manufacturer anymore. All you need is a printer.
So there's
So
actually a couple
if,
different
if,
sources.
if it doesn't have metal in it, you telling me, and I know what you said, but I can't help it. If it doesn't have metal in it, then you telling me that, all right, Twig is just up in there, Commissioner Bill, you just up in there with her printed out gun.
So what
That-
we're looking at
Shoot.
is obviously what's going on as trends as far as behavior as well. And we do share intelligence on that area with the District Attorney's Safe Schools Information Coalition. And we even get intelligence bulletin from the FBI when they see a trend nationally for schools, they share that information with us. So we see, like, you
So
can
we
say
see the
anything going
trend.
on.
What training are we taking to be better detectable? Because once they find out there's a trend, believe me, they got hundreds of thousands of experts working on a way to not make it a trend anymore. So what are we doing to prepare ourselves that these things aren't sneaking in?
So the best thing that we can do there is really communication with our staff and knowing our kids, and knowing our visitors. And basically asking, and part of that is rapport building with some of our students to say, hey, if you know something that's going to endanger some of our other students, our general student body or school, it's the see something, say something. Please share that. And we have
How
seen
does-
positive aspects.
Definitely understood, but, and my expectation is, Director Ristoff and his team has to be up to speed on all of these things, because that's their expertise, right? I don't know how you prepare for all of that. I walk in your office, you gonna check me every time I come in?
I need to.
But how would you know?
That's why we buzz you in.
That's what, I get that part, but I'm in now.
That's why you come through that little
So that-
scanner that you don't know is there.
Okay, okay. So again, but will it detect? And that's the pieces that we have to, that's the constant thing I keep saying that we're being asked to do.
Mhm.
That is not the job of the district, but we have to because we got to protect people. So I get that part, but that's got to be his office's expertise, and they have to guide us on how we can best protect the folks here. Because I don't know how you, without violating folks,
Mhm.
because now you're gonna get a whole lot of people upset that you keep
Mhm.
checking my kid
Yeah.
and my kid never has anything. So why do you keep checking my kid?
And then you'll get a lot of people to say, check my kid, because I want all kids to be safe.
And yeah, and you get a lot that won't. A lot.
And I get that it's a difficult situation all the way across the board. I, to kind of, it's just a question that keeps coming to my mind about, stuff that could not be detectable, but we know are there, or stuff that just, that are those other things that are presenting other situations, safety issues that are occurring thereafter that aren't necessarily a weapon. You know what I mean? And
There are problems, absolutely.
Yeah.
But weapons are the biggest concern.
absolutely. absolutely.
So we do strive to stay in front of that and look at any developing technology that's out there, because as the weapons get better, so does the technology. It's just a matter of catching up to both, on both ends of the spectrum. So middle grade level searches were obviously the K-8 buildings in the middle schools. We're looking at searching, or we have done more searches of 6 through 8, to again look for weapons and get students in an efficient manner. And the whole idea is to do that for safety without cutting into the instructional day. And with the support of the board and the superintendent, we've put more equipment in place at the middle K-8 school level that we can do that efficiently.
And
with
that's
staff.
usually when there has been something that has been brought to our attention, and that's when, the students kind of arrive and they're like, had to stand outside because everybody had to get checked. That's usually when like we get like a phone call or something of that nature about something that's occurring like after that.
Or not necessarily.
Well,
Some
I mean,
are
like,
random,
okay,
and then others are targeted for if there's been problems in the area.
okay, gotcha.
And there's issues that we know are happening around that community,
Okay,
then we would do those more often.
okay.
But are we?
Thank you for the clarification.
Are we looking to make this a daily process for our middles and K-8s like we do for the high schools, or still continue to keep it sporadic?
I think the ultimate goal is to make it more often. I'm not gonna say daily, but
Okay,
more often, because part of that is based on the available staff
okay.
to help run the process.
And I think that if we move to doing it there, it's because we actually had some incidents there
Right.
that
Mhm.
weapons were found. So my sitting on this board, I recognize that very well. So, I just want to go back to something real quick, because you mentioned, you've never had to add, school buses and monitors before.
So they weren't a part of it. We always included transportation. Usually the director
As a
would sit
part of
on
the
our
team,
committee.
right?
Correct.
So for me, I see that as very lucrative, because last year I found myself in an incredible situation where at least 3 times, the central bus driver, did not even report back to us
Mm.
or to our safety department that someone entered the bus with ski mask and tried to harm kids. I got videos.
I understand.
So I'm trying to figure out how that could even happen, that I'm telling you before they're telling you. Right? So that's puzzling to me. So keeping them, I don't know, on the team or whatnot is probably the best, so that we can start to share our protocols and tell them what calls to make, perhaps. I mean, I'm pretty sure as a central driver, they radio their person.
I think for them to be more aware of our procedures and policies is going to be helpful in the long run. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a learning curve, and we need to be able to do it right with central and for student.
And you didn't, and propping the door open in the threat?
That's in one of my next slides.
Okay. I'll hold on.
It
then.
is the next one.
Thank you.
You challenged.
So procedures and practices, and this is, why we do electronic access control, so we know who's coming in and out of our buildings. The whole idea is that if we have a card that's lost or stolen, we can disable it immediately.
Sometimes the swipe don't work. A lot.
We do work through issues as they're made known to us. We are upgrading to the door station to the right is the standard now for any JSCB renovations, or if we're going to add any cameras. So basically it's like a commercial Ring doorbell. So you can have two-way communication, gives us 3 camera angles. It's a really nice operational unit, so you can identify who's actually there.
Mhm.
It also allows us to provide emergency access. So SPD and SFD all get issued key fobs for access to their stations. We import them into our system. So in the event of an emergency, they have immediate access to our schools without being locked out. So the other part is, as we move forward with the Joint Schools Construction Board Phase 3, workers will be required to wear photo ID badges, because obviously there's work going on at some buildings that will be student occupied at the same time.
Is everybody that comes into our school required to have some sort of badge? Other than like a sticker that says like, visitor or something? So,
They have to sign in by visitor policy, and that's actually next. So thank you for the segue.
Construction worker and stuff.
They sign in through what's called Raptor. That's an electronic system we use, which maintains their information. It also does an automatic New York State sex offender registry check with their ID. And we can do custom flags for folks that may have a restriction letter.
We do.
We
have
can put 'em into
conversation with
Raptor.
So, and I think it's a great question.
Repeat.
No, yeah, it's a great question. We have the conversation with our construction companies about who can come into our buildings and not. So are they the ones that's responsible for the background checks of their employees?
Yes, they're supposed to vet them to make sure that they're appropriate to be within a school building.
So
And how do we hold
That
them
wouldn't work.
accountable for checking?
if, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How do we hold them accountable for?
So I believe that's part of their contract when they say that they will provide staff. And I know that in the past, that if we have somebody that's questionable, we just run them through Raptor and it will actually flag them if they're not. So that's kind of our system of checks and balances.
So if I work for Mary's Construction Company, my ID badge will say Twiggy Bill U, Mary's Construction Company, right? Then you'll check it to find out if I'm on that registry? Come on now.
We expect that they will do the vetting that they're supposed to, but if they're not, we can check.
Then do we know how many
wait for
people
them to do
from
it.
Mary's?
Around our kids. We can't even guess. If they not doing it, we have to have a way to know that this person coming in the building is not on that list in any way.
Yeah, we could run them through the Raptor just with ID.
We're gonna have to, because that's a gap right there.
That's not a problem.
And then does
Or-
Mary Construction Company tell us everybody that's supposed to be on the site and all of their names so that we
you
have
can
the,
provide a list and a
Okay.
list of subcontractors, correct?
okay.
And we will ensure that we take the steps to make
You know
sure.
how many, you know how many
People belong.
people we have?
No, I mean, yeah, that's what that's kind of the concern.
Concerns, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
I-
hear you. So what we're really saying is we can't trust the companies to do that work. That's what we're saying. So we're gonna take that on too.
No, I'm not, I don't think, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that
I'm
we,
trying to be clear because I hear the expectation and I understand the
Yeah.
caution.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, we've had the conversation with these companies to say, these people who, anybody with that kind of background can't enter our buildings. It's expected that they're going to do that.
right.
You see what I'm saying? If there's a reason for us to check somebody, but what I'm hearing is check everybody, and I don't know if that's feasible. That's not feasible. That's not,
No,
we don't have the resources for that.
no, I guess that's the only reason why I asked
So how does
whether or
people get
not we had a list so that we would know. That was more or less my thing to kind of,
We're doing the same, I'm sorry.
that was like my thing to just know like, oh, okay, hey, somebody can't just come in here that says they're from Mary's Construction Company and we don't know to expect them. You get what I mean?
We're doing the same thing with the CBOs,
Okay,
Mhm.
the same thing.
okay,
They're bringing people into our buildings that they have to vet.
Okay.
In order to come
But
in.
they're using the same background check people that we're using. I don't know who some of
We're
these,
assuming.
from what the people that I know I've had to pay for, the agencies that I know I've had to pay for, they send them right to the same company
Mhm.
that we use, because you all need it back in a manner
Right.
that he can see that they're clear. So there is something that comes back that says that they're clear, that they can give to you.
Yeah, with the CBO partners, they get vetted through New
They
York State
got
Ed
to.
and it comes to us. There is not that same stipulation for contractors or construction workers.
Mhm. So there needs to be that same stipulation that they provide proof that that background check has been done.
So that's New York State Education Department. The other piece of it is from being here for phase 1 and 2 of JSCB, we've had, exceptions that I can count on one hand of people that really shouldn't be here.
let me be clear, I'm not saying that we should take on that role. I'm not asking, I'm just making sure that at least we know the list of the names and we can confirm that, hey, Sally Smith is with Mary. Johnny is with Tony, you know what I mean? So you get what I mean? Just so that we will know, so that if there is a situation, we can match up. Okay, our student said
Well,
Johnny Smith
Let's have
did
to come
such,
from the company for them to get an ID.
okay,
You know what I mean? So they can't get an ID without the company telling us who's part
Okay.
of their teams.
gotcha. So we're creating the ID, not the company.
Which way are we doing?
That's what I'm
Which way are we
asking.
So
That's what I just said. I got Mary's ID. How you gonna check it?
we still need to work out that detail, but we've had
Mhm.
that conversation with the facilities department that leads the
That was
contracts.
clear.
Okay.
So we're talking about construction people. They are in a construction area of the building where students should not be. Are
Correct.
these folks interacting with our students on a regular
I'm
basis?
sorry, you couldn't avoid them in Henniger.
Yeah, you
They
can
were in
avoid,
the
And it's
hallway.
different.
No, and the schools that had a punch list, you couldn't
you
avoid.
can avoid, them. They walk around everywhere.
They got ladders in the hallways. I went through with the Floria. I mean,
Yeah, they're everywhere
Okay.
during construction.
I just don't see why we couldn't treat them similar to a visitor as they go through the Raptor system. And we do that with visitors now, and we know if they're on the New York State Sex
You mean-
Registry or not.
You mean once or daily?
Well, I mean, once, as they, as.
So once they go in the system, they stay there.
yeah, they don't come back out.
We will definitely focus our attention on that.
And just, can you give us an update as to which way
No, see-
we decide to go or how we?
Missing my point. So if a contractor comes into Henniger today
Mhm.
and they go into Nottingham tomorrow, they still gotta put their stuff through for you to know they're in the system.
Mhm.
So it's a constant, you see what I'm saying? It's a constant check. It's not once. Because you wouldn't know they're in the system unless you run their ID.
Correct.
But if
So-
you
so
run
this-
if
what I'm
you
saying
run
is
the
we-
ID on Raptor today,
Yes.
it doesn't tell you what it says, and then you can distribute it to the other high schools.
No. So if you're saying if something comes up, is that what you mean? If something comes up, that makes perfect sense. Yes. Right? So, but yes, you can do that. But the problem becomes when, how would you know that something came up on me? Or if mine wasn't particularly run,
I don't see you in the building no more. Something happened.
You mean after superintendent, after,
yes,
if they went through once, then
Yes.
it instantly occurs after that time.
yes.
Yeah, you are correct.
Without running their ID, you won't know.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying. We're,
It's the
I
same.
just don't want to set up systems that don't work.
Mhm.
That's my only point. So if we can continue to talk through what might work, I'm all happy to hear that. But to set up systems that's not gonna work, we're just pretending that we're doing something that's gonna be effective.
Well, and if you're telling us this hasn't been an issue,
It really has not in the past.
So is the district providing the ID or is the company providing the ID?
We have not figured that piece out yet.
that's what he's gonna get back to us on,
And
when they
we're-
figure out.
We're requiring the ID now, as
Correct.
part of what we're saying.
Which was not a past requirement.
So if I'm belligerent, I get banned.
Say again,
If I'm belligerent, I get banned.
probably after warning, yeah. Yes.
Do I have to be belligerent like a couple times to get a warning, or does this have to be like once?
I was the first time.
No, because I don't watch those, but some people do
No.
level of belligerence is different.
Playing over there.
Some people,
I'm
some,
just saying.
some people are abusive.
still here.
When it comes, when
But I
it
thought
becomes,
that was belligerent.
when it becomes threatening or abusive, they get banned. That's the level that it hits.
And you don't go to like 2 or 3 incidences. One incident, you
It can be, it depends on how threatening you are.
might be waiting.
I have a question, that goes back to access to a building. I know that when you did the, workshops at the different high schools about security, around because of the incident that happened at one of our middle schools. And I've been to a middle school before and I got, buzzed in.
Mhm.
And you're right, most of the time when you walk through that door, there's women sitting there greeting me. Before I even show them my ID, have we looked more at there being SROs close to the front entrances? Because you go right into the office, but the office consists of women, not that we can't take it on, but
Yeah, clear that up. Clear that up.
That's why we can't take it
I
on.
understand,
But I know
Commissioner.
there was something that we were discussing at the high
So-
school about that.
So at the elementary level, we have added a number of guards and guard positions. So we have somebody right at the front door. Those are buildings, obviously, that have the least amount of resources based on size. But they offer some of our biggest challenges based on their architecture. They were all built many, many years ago
Right.
before there was single point of entry. So we have hired staff there. We've added all the guards with the support of the superintendent and the board. And we're constantly looking at ways to improve that piece. The high schools actually have our most staff, and we have started some of our newer designs like a Henniger or a Nottingham or a PSLA. You can't go any further
Right.
unless you go to the office, and there's always a security station there for the screenings. So we're cognizant of that, and where we can improve it, we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I've been in some conversations this year around entry and access into buildings. And I get it when it's a kid, everybody's like, it's a kid, but when it's staff, it's like, it's not as heightened. So I want us to be on the same accord, whether it's a student or staff, propping the door open, letting somebody in. The consequence has to be the same. Period. I can't continue riding by schools, taking pictures, sending them to y'all. That is unacceptable. And if we got security in the building and I'm standing there for that long and no security, something is wrong. So I get what we're saying, but we just need to figure out how we'll tighten it up. Just a little bit. Especially when it comes to securing our campuses. What scares me is the incident that happened in between on Glenwood, in between the two schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody caught it. Everybody got cameras. My grandson goes to that school, so it really made me have some phone calls, right? Made me take mine and go up there.
What school can you name that don't have?
ITC?
Twig area,
Yeah, say something now.
Twig area, that's my school, so. Are you referring to the incident that happened last year?
Yes,
Yes.
it happened twice. One you heard about, one was down the block a little bit. But we hear about it. And getting people up there and whatnot, right? So again, I just want to make sure that our campuses are secure. To me, it's not the security guard being up front, it's him being outside, making sure that this stuff doesn't enter the building. By the time he gets it, it's already inside the building. So I gotta mention again that we probably need to have little sites, especially with buildings that share parking lots, right? That little sites guard post where they are so that we can see.
So in response to your question and your
I'm gonna
statement,
say it every year, so.
I appreciate you, you know that. So we piloted the Nottingham and Corcoran security trucks where we've got a dedicated mobile there to patrol those campuses. And it's been well received anecdotally at both for increasing the presence. At Henniger, we piloted an electric golf cart. So we have a presence just to make sure that any stray students that may be thinking about going to the corner store, we can corral and bring them back to school. One of the other things that we're piloting with Chief DeFloria's support is we've got 2 mobile guard stations coming that we're going to deploy as needed for exactly that presence that you're speaking of, because we want to pilot it, see how it's received, see if it's got the demonstrated or desired effect, and then think about next steps. But we're on the same page. We're always looking to do something more. And if we can expand the perimeter, and when we've got it in there, defining the campus, because in some of our locations, it's not well defined because we've got parks next to it. And all of our buildings and campuses are literally neighborhood schools. That's how they were designed when everybody used to walk there. So we're looking at that and seeing what we can do for some of the sites, just improve. And it may even be just as simple as delineating the property with a with a fence where there's all kinds of security white papers on the effects of that, where
Right.
you're defining your campus, it's your property. We want it to be a safe space for everybody.
Do we have non-smoking signs all throughout, like on every
Yes.
area? Okay, thought so. But then when we are having students or other people that are engaging in, yes, it may be legal now, substance abuse, like, or substance use outside of our buildings, is that our security that needs to patrol and say, hey, can you maneuver that off of our grounds, or who's,
It is because it's still part of the smoke-free campus. It's part of the
Okay.
state education department.
all right,
And that goes on.
okay.
So those are the directions we're going in. The STEAM High School we're looking at, obviously a beautiful facility that's under renovation, but because of its location and proximity, it's obviously pedestrian friendly, but it's way too close to major roadways. It's directly adjacent from the central hub, which at times brings everybody together and creates some special issues for us. So we're looking at that. I love the superintendent's plan with that park. That'll help us create a little bit of a buffer to the area. And the other part that we think about is when we're at the STEAM High School and we need to do a fire drill, we need to evacuate the building to an outdoor staging location from various exits. So those are the things that we're looking at and planning for, because obviously we need to make sure that everybody is safe. So with that said, these are the issues that we're looking at. Again, the behavior and mental health crisis response. So we're working with student support services on training for all our school staff and counselors. We did do some of the training in conjunction with SPD. We're going to continue that on a annual basis.
I would also suggest that you check out SUNY Upstate Mental Health First Aid Training. It's free.
Thank you. So noted. We're looking at the panic buttons for schools we talked about before. We just have to consider them. It's not necessarily adopting them at this point. Somewhere down the road, they're probably going to make it mandatory. We want to put a security operations center kind of similar to our guard station when we relocate our offices, because we'll actually have room to do it, because we have multiple events going, and just to make sure that we can monitor cameras effectively. We've had the support for the addition of guards for school sites without a secure entry. Thank you for that support. We continue to hire so that there will be guards there. Communication plan for all sites. We're going to work with our communications department for our see something, say something, displayed visitor procedures. That was incorporated through our work with the Code of Conduct Committee. Again, this year, it's now printed in the Code of Conduct, expectations for visitors to our schools. We never want to discourage persons in a parental role from visiting our schools, but we want to remind them of these are the parameters, so there's no disruption to the educational process for our kids. An architectural review is going on of sites needing modifications of entryways. Yes, Commissioner Billy?
I'll keep going.
Okay. Adding search technology for athletic events, we're looking at the Evolve system as one system that we could possibly deploy. That's where you've got the walkthrough weapons detection system. We did apply with the help of our special programs department for a Department of Justice grant in June of 2024. We're hoping to be awarded so that the district doesn't have to bear the cost of that. There's a local share, but not the whole cost of it. And we're always looking at researching and field testing of new security products, whether it's variable message boards to put out information, whether in lockdown or something that's going on at the school. So this is my together we can all enhance safety by not propping open doors. That's a huge piece. It's something simple, but if we can change that culture for staff and students, that's huge. Reporting something. If you see something, say something. Just the role modeling of wearing our staff IDs every day. It's easy to tell if somebody belongs in a building or not. Timely reporting of lost or stolen IDs so that we can deactivate it and issue a replacement. Ensuring that student dismissal processes are thorough and all students are accounted for. Long-term absences are reported and communicated accordingly. If staff sees that a student is missing, for any certain amount of time, that they communicate that effectively with an administrator so we can get our social workers involved. We can avoid any tragedy if we need to involve the police or social services or child protective. we need them to be our eyes and ears to make sure that's going on. And then just simply looking out for each other as neighbors would, because we're all part of the greater school community. So with that said, any further comments, questions, or suggestions?
So there was one area that I need to make a comment in, because again, I felt personally pulled in. Athletics and security and support. I'm just getting a little tired of people thinking they can just hit our coaches and hit our kids. I'm getting absolutely tired of it. Getting tired of the racial comments. And we are the one that gets penalized. We are the one that gets called out. We're the one that gets harassed and harmed. We're the ones that get penalized. We have nothing in there to protect our coaches or anything when we go out. When they go out. And I understand that we might not have money for it, but we can find some money. We find it for everything else. I hope you write a grant if that's what needs to happen. We can look at some grants. Where's Mike? We'll look at some grants together and write the grants. And get them in, but we can no longer have our kids in places where we know black faces, brown faces, city faces aren't wanted and receive some of what we received at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year. It wasn't just football. It was football, basketball, lacrosse, wrestling. And then we're leaving our kids, and this isn't a slight on first student, well, kind of is, but okay. We're leaving our kids in these aggressive neighborhoods for hours before the bus returns, with all of these tensions about our kids being in the neighborhood with no protection, just a coach. Right? A coach sometimes to get beat up on the sidelines. So I just think that we have to start addressing home as well as away games for local as well as others, because we can't go through the level of incidents again that we went through last school year.
But I also have to say, I agree with your statement, but I also want to mention that the superintendent did go out of his way and did a great job trying to be at those away games and sending support at places where he, you know what I mean, could and stuff like that. So I would be remiss if we didn't mention that. But I feel exactly what you're saying, and I agree it's an issue that we need to figure out what is a long-term, you know what I mean, solution and what we can do totally. But I want to make sure that we do mention that the superintendent was traveling and was,
I get it,
doing
but
those
we
things.
started that because of an incident that happened,
Right.
not
Agree.
because we just had a plan and
Okay.
it was something that he said to do.
Okay.
It was a means to an end. What I'm asking us for is to plan for this, because we know it happens every single year. Even when he was playing, it happened. So again, because we know it happens, and I'm not taking anything from what he did, because what he did was wonderful. Right, but I'm asking us to take a look at it in a different way, because it's not in that plan in anywhere. And if it's not written, you know, it don't exist.
I got you.
So I'm gonna say, I agree, something needs to be done. I don't think it can't stay a school issue, because we can't make it happen. We don't have that many resources to cover that many kids in that many places.
But then let's
So it's
get
gotta be a
a
full
protocol
community.
that says if it happens, we call Big Five, we call the state, we call this person, we call that
Yeah.
person, and we're gonna say to them, get on these people because they violating our rules.
Absolutely, we need to do that anyway.
And we're gonna hold section
but I still
accountable
think-
for its own policy.
But I still think that the community can help us, because if parents are traveling with their kids, we got people there. That's what I'm saying. We need to make this a bigger issue than just the
But
district.
in another venue,
Yeah.
you all said,
We don't have
be
the authority.
careful with the people, with the parents traveling, so it's a double-edged sword.
It absolutely is.
So I
Both
don't
ways.
want to get out here and act like we didn't even have that conversation.
Oh, no, I'm not.
Because
Here's what I'm
if
saying
I
to you.
go and somebody swing, it's gonna be a problem.
But we're sending people who have no authority on somebody else's grounds.
Mhm.
So even when we send them, our security people have any authority there. They're not supposed to do anything, but they're witnesses, their eyes, their support for our kids, yes.
But we know a
But
state
that's all it
police
is.
officer in common.
Huh?
We know a state police officer in common.
Mhm.
Let's talk to them about what a protocol would be to initiate something if there was violence going on.
But, and I
Because
think it's a lot more,
that's police that can go anywhere.
but it's also a lot more than the violence, because like you said, it's the other things that are being said.
But those are
Done.
now considered hate crimes. So if you want to keep doing that in front of the state,
Mhm.
that's on you,
Okay.
because there's a state charge now. I ain't say put it in there. I said we need to address it.
Absolutely. No disagreement on that one.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Nope.
Thank you very
Director
much.
of Staff.
I appreciate it.
Chief Pachenko, I didn't say what, I didn't even say what it comes up as.
My favorite
Can't be
report
chief no
every
more.
quarter.
You spoke Can't be chief.
Right, right.
So I'm gonna just take a little pivot here. The quarterly financials are in your packet. You have a detail by function of where we are quarterly on those financials, as well as an analysis that the budget team put together. But instead of going through the PowerPoint, I also am going to talk about the monthly financials, which kind of roll in to the yearly. So I'm just going to take this moment to step over that a little bit, and we're going to talk about the federal stimulus funding, and then I'll touch back on the where we are at the end of this year after this presentation. This year, as you know, and over the last 3 years, we've had a allocation of almost $109 million in ARPA spending. This spending is set to sunset September 30th. The original 20% learning loss was $21.8 million. We've spent $36.2 million to date on learning loss. We're well ahead of that target. In the first year, we spent about $30.6 million. In 22-23, we spent about $27.2 million. And in 23-24, we're poised to spend a little over $51 million this year in ARPA money. And the question does keep coming up, are we going to spend it? And my answer is yes, we are.
Better.
So right now, you have about $9 million remaining. So as you can see, we've expended about $46.7 million on the learning. And the indirects about 3.2, PD is 6.7. And again, we're about 99.9 million, almost 92% spent. And so the plan is over the next 3 months, I can talk to you about what we plan on spending that on. The other thing is with ARPA funding, they allow us to charge off indirect cost. So that will be our catch-all at any point because we've not maximized the indirect cost expenditures. So that's where we'll catch up on any additional funding that remains. As we've talked about, there are 225 FTE positions that are currently on ARPA. These positions will all be shifting over to the general fund once ARPA ends. Again, some of these positions were part of the learning loss. Some of it was social emotional learning. And again, we've done a really good job of figuring out ways with this year's budget to incorporate them into the budget so that we continue some of this ARPA work moving forward.
So for the 24-25 school year, those positions were moved.
They were moved, yes.
Chief, are any of those 12-month positions where we would be able to expend a summer portion on ARPA?
Yes, they're staying on ARPA all the way through, well, as close as we possibly can to the September 30th
Okay.
deadline. So there might be some areas where we can also utilize ARPA through September.
So we could potentially see some savings on the A fund budget because they were shifted full year on the budget, but you're still expending them for that month or
Yes.
so. Okay.
Yes. So I just want to talk to you about some of the areas where we've expended some money. Math intervention, we're about $14 million that we've put toward math interventions. Talk about the Everybody Counts, the music and movement campaign. Reading interventions, $4.7 million. Then we talk about summer school. Again, we're looking at the last 2 years of summer school. So we've not going into 3 years of summer school, $12.4 million of additional learning time for our students. Window replacements, $7.5 million. I don't know if anybody's been to a few of our schools, but at the moment we're replacing the windows, all the windows in 6 of our school buildings using ARPA funding. So we're talking about windows that you could not see out of, or windows did not open, or windows that just did not make a very attractive learning environment inside, and aesthetic environment looking from the outside. So that we've been able to use the ARPA money for that. Classroom furniture, we're about $6 million in on classroom furniture. I believe we're up to 15 schools, where we've there's a significant number of changes with the classroom furniture. So there's a desk that was, that I used to have with my name written on it. It's no longer going to be there after 30 something years. Then when there's the student technology, $7.1 million. Those are the computers and one-on-one devices and the hotspots. And so we're talking about what we're going to do the rest of this year, spend this money down. We're looking at summer school. So right now, we're anticipating summer school will be again around $4 million. It's averaged about that the last three summers. Summer school transportation will be about $1 million. And we're going to do another school supply order. That'll be somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million. What's nice about that too is now with a new ERP system, we have access to utilize Amazon. So that's going to make this orders a lot easier for the schools. The assistant superintendents have put their orders in for us. So hopefully those orders will be in at the start of the school year. And then again, what I talked about was indirect costs. So that'll be our area where we'll be able to make sure that we spend every penny down, because they do give you room. And somewhere there, we have a remaining balance about $3.5 million, and we can go up to 6. So give or take how some of these other expenditures shake out, we can just use the indirect cost to balance that out. And indirect costs will be revenue that will come into the district as a revenue stream, which we a little more than what we budgeted for and anticipated for next year. So that'll, in a sense, be ARPA money that we put in indirect that we can then allocate toward utilizing those funds during the coming school year as additional revenue. Anybody have any questions on the ARPA monies and the stimulus funding?
No, I've been knocking on every window I go by to make sure it's triple paid.
Make sure the lights are off.
Yep. Please make sure the lights is off, Rob. Me and Glenn gotta go that way tonight.
Yeah, so went down, remember.
Mike, on the indirect, did we not charge it off as we used the funds over the course of the 3 years and we're just playing catch up at the end?
Correct.
Okay.
We want to make sure that we had the money there for all the initiatives and everything that we're trying to do. Again, there were some pivots during the year. There's cost and the quotes of windows that came in at one price, but then once you're finally able to order them and things like that, they actually came in a little bit less. So we've been shifting things around as we've moved along. Okay, so now the next thing we'll start to talk about are the contracts and consultancies for approval. First contract is to renew an agreement with Better Lessons to provide professional development focused on building internal capacity of teachers and supporting their development and closing opportunity gaps, examining biases and shifting actions and views. This is going to be an amount for $149,000, and it's going to be paid out of the general fund budget. Next contract is an agreement to renew an agreement with the Joyce V. Brown Consulting Group. And this is to support the district's design on a long-term and sustainable data-informed school counseling program that's aligned to the district's post-secondary goals and student achievement priorities through June of 2025. This is an amount not to exceed $100,000, and this is coming out of the general fund budget. Next contracting is agreement with Foundation 44, and this is to provide a full-time clinician for the progressive programs at Oasis and Promising Future Leaders Academy. This includes supervision and training through June of 2025. This is not to exceed $150,000, and this is coming out of the general fund. Next group of contracts are out of the Office of Teaching and Learning. The first one is an agreement with Junior Achievement of Central New York. And this is to help students build a foundation on which they can make intelligent financial decisions that last a lifetime, including decisions related to income, expenses, savings, and credit through June of 2025. This is an amount not to exceed $10,950, and this is coming out of the general fund budget and supporting CTE. Next contract is an agreement to renew an agreement with Solution Tree, and this is to partner with the district to provide support in implementing professional learning communities tailored to each context of each school. This is an amount not to exceed $1.173 million, and this is going to be coming out of the general fund budget and also out of a grant funding. Next contract is to renew an agreement with EL Education. There are going to be 4 of these agreements with EL Education. This is to partner with the district to provide strategic planning, coaching, and professional learning focused on deepening student engagement and transforming teaching and learning at Brighton Academy through June of 2025. This is an amount not to exceed $85,650. This is coming out of the general fund budget. And all of these with EL Education are a little bit different. Some schools are at different points and periods of time, or they have different types of services. So that's why the dollar amounts will be different. The next is to renew agreement with EL Education, and this is again to do the same things, but this is going to be for Expeditionary Learning Middle School through June of 2025. Amount not to exceed $53,700, and this is coming out of the general fund budget. Next, renew an agreement with EL Education, and this will be with McKinley Brighton Elementary School through June of 2025. This is an amount not to exceed $96,600, and this is coming out of the general fund budget. And the last of the 4 EL Education programs is with Oasis Academy through June of 2025. And this is an amount not to exceed $55,100, and this is coming out of the general fund budget. Next agreement is to renew an agreement with Stephen Garofalo to partner with the district to provide leadership coaching and support for the continued implementation of academic programming at up to 4 schools selected in collaboration with the chief academic officer through June of 2025. This is an amount not to exceed $200,600, and this is coming out of the general fund budget. And the last one under teaching and learning is to renew an agreement with TCA Consulting LLC, and that's to partner with the district to provide leadership coaching and support for the continued implementation of academic programming of up to 4 schools, again, in collaboration with the chief academic officer through June of 2025. And this is an amount not to exceed $200,600, and this will be paid out of the A fund budget.
Can I just ask a question about the last 2? There look to be a lot of similarities between those 2 contracts. Would they be at 4 different schools each? Okay.
Yes.
Depending on the needs of the schools.
Okay. So TCA would be servicing different schools than Stephen Graff. Okay. Thank you.
So next is the resolution for the board to approve of the school comprehensive education plans for the 24-25 school year that Eric so nicely presented to you. And then this plan shall be formally approved by the Board of Education. In the case of CSI schools, shall be subject to the approval of the New York State Commissioner of Education. Next resolution, following up Director Ristoff, is the adoption of the district safety plan that he presented just a moment ago. And then this is the Board of Education. School district is committed to ensuring and maintaining a safe school environment for all students, staff, and visitors. So therefore, the Board of Education, upon recommendation of Superintendent of Schools, hereby adopts the Syracuse City School District Safety Plan and building level emergency plans for the 24-25 school year. Next resolution is the audit committee charter. Last Friday, the audit committee met and went over the charter. There are no changes to the charter. So this resolution states that the Board of Education reviewed and approved the annual reading of the Audit Committee Charter at the July 22nd, 24 work session. Now therefore be it the board hereby accepts annual review of the school district's Audit Committee Charter. And you've all been provided with a copy of that charter. The next resolution is the revision of award for RFP 2023-014 before or after school programming services. Last August, the board approved proposals from the YMCA, the Westcott Community Center, and Red House for one base year and 3 additional option years that was approved. This resolution is to utilize the first of the 3 additional option years for the period of September 1st through June 30th of 2025. We've listed each vendor and each of the schools that they'll be partnering with to provide after-school enrichment supports in our buildings.
Superintendent, I'd just like to ask that you and your staff check in with the Red House to make sure that the schools that they are at actually want them there.
Okay.
Why are there amounts on some schools and not others? I guess, like, for example, I'm looking,
They're all there. It's
like, I
like-
see Red House 62, in the last one, 62,251, but then there's no amount down.
I think
I
they have.
guess I'm
to
just
put down
it didn't line up nice. It just didn't line up.
Oh, they line, okay,
It just didn't, the
all
way
right,
it
thank you,
tapped, yeah, it just didn't line up exactly
all right.
right there, but they're all right there. And again, each one of these are grant funded, just so you know, there's various grants that we partner with for these. So these are all grant funded. Okay. And then I will briefly touch on the monthly financial statements. So we have ended the year. This is unaudited financial reporting that I'm going to be giving you. And again, this follows up with the quarterly finance reports. So far, we've received $528 million in revenue. This is actually a little bit more revenue than we had anticipated. It's actually 101%. So we're a little more revenue this year than we anticipated. And our expenses are 511.6 million, or 96.6% of the budget. Again, we are still making some final payments for last year and catching up from the ERP transition, so that number will increase by the time you see the final audited numbers in December. State aid is projected to be about 6.8 million more than anticipated. This is because of ENL, BOCES, and special services aid, transportation, and charter school transition aid increases that we did not anticipate. When we talk about where we are with this budget in terms of expenses, salaries were less than budget by $6.3 million, but over by about 13.6 million from last year. Benefits are 3.6 less than budget, but almost 14.2 million more than last year. So between the two of those, we've spent almost about $28 million more in salaries this past year. Charter tuition is 2.8 million higher due to the higher enrollment from last year. But this was planned, and we actually had 736,000 less than we budgeted expenditures. And contractual expenses are 3.8 million less than budget. Again, we had some of the ARPA funding and some grant funding, so that was able to offset some of those. But again, we spent about $9.5 million more than last year on contractual expenditures. And a good portion of that is because of the new ERP transition that we've been transitioning through. Just talk about our financial position. We have about $185 million cash on hand, which is nice to have. We have money in the bank, which is drawing interest. This past year, we received about $1 million more in interest revenue than we had anticipated. So that was one of the reasons why our revenue was a little higher. But also that makes sure that we won't have to borrow, do any short-term borrowing next year in order to make payments, because we do have the cash on hand. as we know, last year, the fund balance increased by about $35 million. And we're anticipating using about $35 million of that this coming year. Revenue is almost 6.8 million more than budget, and expenses are currently almost $18 million less than budget. To just kind of summarize that, I think once everything's all paid out and set at the end of the day, we'd probably be looking at around a $16 million fund balance between our revenues and our expenditures. Once it's all said and done, again, we've met and we've talked about the transition of our capital projects and leveraging our capital aid. So one of the things we're going to be looking at doing is coming back to the board and looking at where we've allocated fund balance, what's allocated, what's unallocated, and having discussions about where we would allocate that additional fund balance. As you may have heard, there's been some discussions at the state level about school districts with larger fund balances. They give us the ARPA money and we do the best we can to transition for when the money goes away. And now they're talking about, well, now you got all this money, maybe we're not going to give you as much. So we need to have a discussion about how we're going to allocate that fund and be really strategic about it. Like we've already talked about, maybe continuing to do some of these capital projects that we've been working on. Rob and his team have done a great job. Besides the windows and the furniture, we got plans for a couple stadiums going on right now. We got the STEAM school that's going on. We got a number of roof projects and parking lot projects going on. They're really busy this summer getting our buildings up to shape for this coming school year. So I think that everything we've been doing in our buildings with capital has been a tremendous investment. Something I've never seen here in the 30 years that I've been in this district, the amount of funds and the amount of things we're doing in our buildings to make them invitable and safe learning environments has been great. So that's where I am with the monthly financials. Does anybody have any questions?
Foundation aid, not necessarily about the financials, but with the meetings that are going on to get feedback. Or do we have anyone from the district representing in person at those meetings, or if you're gonna able to attend? The name of the foundation is eluding me for a second. I live and breathe it and I can't remember the name. Rockefeller, thank you. Have we had anyone able to attend or provide testimony? Okay.
And we can also participate virtually, because what's happening is when they go to testify, you're really gonna be there for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't make a whole lot of
And
sense.
none of them are local to us.
Exactly.
Yeah, drive 5 hours to Buffalo back and forth for 10 minutes to speak.
So we are participating, but we're participating virtually.
Okay.
Yeah, we provide the big five with some of our thoughts on what they would share on our behalf. I've also been keeping track of the other testimony that's been out there, and it's pretty consistent with what we would say. It's really, no different. They're using the 2000 census, which makes no sense whatsoever. They're talking about changes to identify special education students, ENL students. They're talking about tax rates and tax bases in some of the cities, and how they're comparable to other areas. So there's a number of things that they're already touching on. I think once they're done with these roundabouts, they'll probably put together more of a committee and a meeting type of thing. So we'll be in touch with Jennifer Pyle and the Big Five of how, our voice can be at that table. But nothing has really been said that we don't agree with at this point.
So the feedback I've heard is that it's, the testimony is redundant. Just as you're saying, everyone's sort of saying the same thing. And one of the other areas that won't necessarily impact us is regionalization. But that will have some impact for the STEAM school when they're trying to push those regionalization conversations.
I think the Big Five represents 47% of the state.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Mike,
40%.
thanks for the input on these.
Yep. The next thing is the claims audit report for the month of June. As you can see, we've been really busy and Jessica's been really busy with processing these claims. We're at a 95.1% success rate. Again, we're working through a new ERP system and a new process. So I I'm kind of very happy with that, Ray. As a matter of fact, when you're going through a new system and you're still at that level, they're doing a really good job of trying to keep up and catch up and learn while they're doing the same
You
thing.
said what? Say it again. Repeat it the exact way you said it. if
They're
you-
doing a good job of trying to keep up and learn at the same time.
So all of these claim packet errors that I haven't seen before in the graph that you sent out. These, did the packet change?
Talking about the 95%. He's talking about 95%. Is that what you're talking about, Mike?
Yes. There's 72 and the 29. People are learning a new system.
72,
People are learning a new
59,
process.
52, 63, 51. You gave me a month by month piece, which we normally get on a graph.
Mhm.
We always ask because we want to know, because we had to increase something for the claims auditor. Is the claims different in a certain part? She came and she talked to us at a luncheon about having to have people redo things. This was 2 years ago. Year ago?
I think a year and a half
Year,
ago.
year and a half ago. But I still see a whole lot of errors.
That's what he's speaking to, though. What
From
he's
the-
saying is, we just underwent a brand new system. That, you want to explain?
Yeah, so there was over 2,000 claims, 2,055 claims. So you have people from different departments, you have people from different schools, you have people processing paperwork in a different manner than they have before in a new system.
And many in new positions.
So I think that, you have 72 and 29, so you have a little over 100 out of 2,055. And as people are learning a new system and a new way of doing things,
It's
I
not
think
little
we're
to me
getting that.
because these things add up. The first one on here is fraud. So this not little to me when it's coming to finance and people making mistakes and it's going back and coming out and we have to increase people's salaries in order to keep up with the number of claims that are coming out. This is the part of the budget that, or the claims piece that I'm really concerned about. Because as we sit down and try to understand what happens when the claims piece goes out, before I was asking you, what is this month similar to what it was last year in this month, right? And I understand that we're going through new a new app or new protocols or whatnot, but this is a lot to me. Even though there were 2,000 that went through, this is a lot, right? So what are we doing to comprehensively train people to use this system?
That's the phase we're in. That people are learning the system right now.
Yeah.
That-
And-
that's good.
Yeah,
man.
so I was gonna say from my professional experience, 95% is an excellent number. You have, nothing goes out the door that's incorrect. And that's what Jessica's, or our claims auditor is here for. She's catching those human error mistakes that are going to happen. And she does a great job of catching them. It is a lot of volume for us to go through all of that. But just in my professional opinion, from what I've seen at the stage we're in and learning a new software program and the turnover of staff is going to impact that number significantly. And I'm not sure what the turnover of clerical staff is here at the district, but in the industry as a whole, clerical staff has had a huge turnover. And it's training those folks as they come in, as those folks become more seasoned, as we all like to call ourselves. Those numbers that efficiency rate will go up. In the past, we've been as high as 98, 90, 99% pre-COVID.
And
But
in the
folks are
past, we've
still
had
learning.
the green area has been higher than the yellow in some areas. So again, I'm gonna ask questions where it doesn't make sense. It's not my profession, so I'm gonna ask questions.
No,
And it
absolutely.
doesn't-
And that's your job to ask.
And
those
it doesn't
questions.
make sense.
Where we are and what we're going through and the training, to answer your question, we are training people currently.
And how much longer will they be trained to be able to have,
Until they're proficient.
how long have we had the system? How long have they been training? Since July?
Well, you have to understand, some of this stuff comes from the schools. You have a new clerical in a building that's processed.
It depends on when stuff is going into the system.
So when do we get the new system? You said May?
We were up and running in May,
Up
right?
in a little before May, yeah,
May of,
This year.
this year.
Okay, so this go all the way back to July,
Of last year.
Last year.
and it was still high. Same errors. On the old system,
Mhm.
was still errors.
Yep.
New system,
You-
errors.
You're gonna,
So again, I'm going to say, because we've had these same errors before, no matter what system we use, what are we gonna do to make sure that we
Be
can?
the same number.
Same number, yes.
Okay.
Same number and same categories.
Yep, it's the purchasing error and the claim packet error. So again, it could be that somebody didn't add numbers up correctly or didn't.
But it's
put
happening on the old
together.
system and the new system, so something ain't matching up.
Well, I think you're always going to get errors. When you have 2,000.
Just a minute ago, it was because it was a new system.
Because
Part of it, we can just stop. We can talk
Get that
offline.
out.
We can talk offline.
That's all.
We can talk offline.
Yeah.
My question is gonna get more intense because I can see the way this going.
Okay. And the next is the JSCB board report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Superintendent will be brief again tonight. The JSCB Advisory Council met and worked on the RFPs for the program manager, the independent compliance officer, and the financial plan. It's expected that the program manager RFP will be published very soon, and hoping we get proposals by the end of August, early September, and the others will follow. That's all I have for JCB Phase 3. Thank you.
We finally got all approvals that we needed to move forward, correct?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. There's more.
Wow.
Read the room, Superintendent.
I say good job.
But there'll be more to come through state as we go through this process. Thank you.
And Rob, no, I'm just kidding.
do any board members have committee reports they'd like to present at this time?
We have a policy committee meeting tomorrow at 12 noon here in this room.
We did as Commissioner or Chief Panchenko, sorry, Chief Panchenko. I upgraded you.
Go ahead.
As he mentioned, we had an audit committee meeting on July 12th. We went over the charter. We set the timeline for the audit and the dates for review for the audit. And we updated the audit committee meeting dates to accommodate for the audit timeline. We also welcomed a new committee member. And we are continuing to seek additional committee members. If anyone has anyone they would like to recommend, it is a fabulous committee. We also appointed the chair for the next year at that meeting.
And who was that?
Great
Some commissioner of education decided to be the chair. That would be me. That would be me.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm honored.
Condolences.
It's a wonderful committee.
So, and you are all welcome to attend at our next meeting in September if you would like.
Thank you.
There is no other business. Meeting is adjourned.
So